there, we've broken each one up into thirds now. Now they told us that 2/3 of a pound of fish is going to be a serving. So if I want to show 2/3 of a pound of fish, how many of these parts am I going to shade in? Two, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade in these two one color, and that's going to represent one of my servings I have. I'm going to shade in two more another color. So I'm going to shade in this one right here, there's one, and that one right there. So there's another 2/3 that I have right there of a pound. So I got another serving. I'm going to shade in, okay, one right there, two right there. So that's another serving that I have. And then I'm going to shade in that one right there and that one right there. So we've shaded in our different servings of 2/3 of a pound there. So our first question is, how many full servings are possible? So how many full servings of 2/3 of a pound are possible here? We think about, okay, here's one serving, two servings, three servings, and four servings. So how many full servings are there?
4.
There are 4 full servings, right? We can serve 4 people 2/3 of a pound of fish. Because there's 2/3 of a pound, there's 2/3 of a pound, there's 2/3 of a pound, there's 2/3 of a pound. So 4 people can each get a full serving of 2/3 of a pound. Now, do we have anything left over, though?
Yes.
Yeah, we have this part right here left over, right? We have that part left over. Now, how much of a pound is that we have left over? Do we think about, we had broken these pounds up into thirds, so this part right here is how much of a pound?
2/3.
Well, how much of a pound is left over?
Oh.
The blank one here that we haven't shaded in, that's how much of a pound? Say it again.
1/3.
It's 1/3 of a pound that we have left over, right? We have 1/3 of a pound left over. Now, what we need to think about, though, is we need to describe that as far as how much of a serving it is. So they told us that how many pounds, or how much of a pound is a serving? According to the problem, how much of a pound is a serving? 2/3 of a pound. So if I have here my full pound and I've broken it up into 3 parts for 2/3, I'm going to erase that part of it right there. That is representing one serving, right? That is 2/3 there. That is representing one serving. Now, how much of a pound did we say we had left over, though?
1/3.
We had 1/3 of a pound left over, right? So we have this amount right here left over, what I'm shading in there. Now, if we think about that, this 2/3 of a pound is now the whole, because that is a whole serving. How many parts is that serving here broken up into? If this is the full serving, what we see right here, how many parts is it broken up into? 2 parts, right? And out of those 2 parts, how many of those parts have I shaded in?
1/3.
Or I've shaded in how many of those 2 parts?
1.
1 out of those 2 parts, right? So as far as how much of a serving I have a half of a serving. Because I need 2/3 of a pound to make a full serving. I would need to be able to shade both of those in to have another full serving to serve a 5th person, but I only have 1/3 of a pound. So I only have half of the amount I need. So as far as how I can describe the amount left over, I have 4 full servings, and then I have a half of a serving. So I have a total of 4½ servings. Because what we got to think about is we're not describing it by pounds, we're describing it by servings. Because they're asking us how many servings are possible. So again, to kind of recap what we've done so far, we started out with 3 pounds of fish here, 3 full pounds of fish. Well, we're serving those in 2/3 of a pound. So we broke each one of those pounds up into thirds, breaking each one up into 3 parts there. And then we started shading in our 2/3. So I shaded in 1 2/3 serving black, another 2/3 serving red, another 2/3 serving green, another 2/3 serving blue there. And we see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 full servings that are possible. But after those full 4 servings, we still have some left over. We have 1/3 of a pound of fish left over. But we want to describe that 1/3 of a pound as how much of a serving it is. So remember, they tell us that a serving is 2/3 of a pound. So I drew up here my 2/3, right? My 2/3 of a pound here. And if we have 1/3 of a pound, we have half of the amount we need for another serving. Because we would need another 1/3 there to make this a full serving, to be able to serve a 5th person. So we have half of the amount we need here. We have 1/3 out of the 2/3 we need to serve another person, so we have half of a serving. So we think about how many total servings we have. Good morning. We have 4.5 total servings here. Now, if we think about the fraction division we did here, we started off with how many pounds they told us?
3.
We had 3 pounds, and we were dividing them into servings of how much of a pound?
2/3.
2/3 of a pound. So we took 3 and we divided it by 2/3. Now we talked about, there are 2 ways we can talk about division. We can think about it as taking 3 and dividing it into 2/3 of a group, but that's really kind of hard to visualize. Or we can think about it as how many 2/3 are there in 3. And that's the way that we visualized it here. We thought about how many 2/3 are there in 3. Because we had our 3 holes here, and we saw there are 1, 2, 3, 4 full 2/3 in there, plus we have another half of a 2/3 right there. So when we take 4 and divide it by 2/3, we think about how many 2/3 are, 3 and divide it by 2/3. When we think about how many 2/3 are there in 3, our answer would be what? We just did up here visually, 3 divided by 2.5. What did we get as our answer?
4.5.
We got 4.5, or 2/3, I should say. We got 4.5 there. So there are 4.5 2/3 in 3. We see our 4 full 2/3 here, plus another half of 2/3 right there. So we're thinking about dividing by a fraction here. We're thinking about how many blank are there in blank. In this case, how many 2/3 are there in 3? And we see there are 4.5 2/3 in 3. Any questions or anything we're left wondering from problem A there? All right, we're going to look at one more together, and then you are going to work on some practice with this as well. So it tells us that we have 2.5 pounds of fish. But now the serving size is at 3/4 of a pound. So we're starting off with how many pounds of fish? 2.5, right? So I'm going to draw, I got 1 circle here, 1 circle there, and then I'm going to take this last circle, I'm going to half it right there. So I'm going to shade in my entire 2 1/3 pounds here. So there's 1 pound, there's 2 pounds, and there's a half of a pound there. So in this one, we're starting off with what I've shaded is the amount that I'm starting off with. That's my 2.5 pounds I'm starting off with. Now, they tell us that we're going to be, what is the serving size in this case? How much of a pound?
3/4.
3/4 of a pound. So if we want to break each one of these up into 3/4, we're going to break each circle up into how many parts?
4.
4 parts, right? If we want to break them up into 4s, we're going to break them up into 4 parts. So I've taken my 2.5 pounds there, my circles, and I've broken them up into 4 parts there so that I can look at fourths now. Now, how many fourths do they tell us is a serving?
3.
3/4, right? So how many of these parts am I going to need to shade in to represent 1 serving? 3. So I'm going to start and I'm going to shade in 1, 2, 3. So that's 1 serving that we have right there. I got 1 here I can shade in, plus I can shade in 2 from here. And that's another 3/4, that would be 2 servings. I can shade in 1 here, 2 there, and then a 3rd one over here. So that's another 3/4, so that's another serving there. So how many full servings do I have so far?
3.
I have 3 full servings, right? Black, the red one, and the blue and the green one. They're all representing 3/4. So I have 3 full servings. But do I still have some left over here that I haven't double shaded?
Yes.
How much of a pound do I have left over? How much of a pound does this part right here represent? 1/4 of a pound, right? Now what we need to think about is how much of a serving does that represent? So what we can do is if I draw a picture representing our serving, so I'm going to have a circle here, my hole, and then I'm going to break it up into 4 parts. And my serving, we said, is how many out of 4 parts?
1.
The serving is how much of a pound, according to the problem?
3/4.
3/4, right? So this right here represents what we call a serving, 3/4 there. So those 3, if they're full, that represents a whole other serving. But how many fourths of a pound did we say we had left?
1.
1.
We had 1/4 of a pound left, right?
Mhm.
So this is how much we actually have left. This is how much total we would need for another serving there. So if we think about that, this now represents our whole. This is our entire serving. That whole is broken up into how many parts here?
3.
It's broken up into 3 parts. And out of those 3 parts, how many do I have shaded in?
1.
1. So I have 1/3 of a serving. I have 3 full servings, and then I have 1/3 of a serving left over. So I have a total of 3 1/3 servings there. Because again, we started off with 2.5 pounds. We broke each one of those circles up into fourths. We started shading in 3/4, so we got 3/4 there, 3/4 there, and 3/4 there. That's 3 full servings we have.
Okay, this is easier than I thought it was going to be.
But then we have a little bit left over here, right? We got a little bit left over right there. We have 1/4 of a pound left over. So then we had to think about what a full serving is. A full serving is 3/4 of a pound. We have 1 out of those 3/4 that we need. We need 3/4 to make another serving. We have 1 out of those 3/4 that we need. So we have 1/3 of a serving. We would have to have 2 more fourths to make another full serving, to be able to serve a 4th person right there. So we think about our division. We started off with how many pounds? Started off with 2.5 pounds, and we divided it into servings of what size?
3/4.
3/4 of a pound. And when we thought about it, we really thought about how many 3/4 are there in 2.5. You know, how many 3/4 make up 2.5 there, which we saw there were how many 3/4 that make up 2.5?
3 1/3.
3 1/3, right? There's 3 full 3/4, and then 1/3 of 3/4 right there. So when we take 2.5 and divide it by 3/4, it equals 3 1/3 there. Now, what we're looking at with these problems right now is just a visual to help us understand what we're doing when we're dividing these fractions. And to help us think about what we're really thinking about is we're thinking about how many blank are there in blank, meaning how many 3/4 are there in 2.5. Or for the previous one, how many 2/3 are there in 3 and so forth there. And the visual model is helping us see how many 3/4 there are in 2.5 there. Like I said, we're building up to ultimately being able to have some steps and some methods to be able to divide fractions without always having to start off with the visual. But we're grounding ourselves in the visual models first, so we're able to understand what we're doing when we start dividing fractions using some steps that we'll come up with next class and a method that you'll come up with. So any questions on the problem A and B here, these examples that we've kind of worked with together there?
So if I don't know how to visualize that, is there any way like you can do calculation like to get the
Well, like I'm saying, we're going to get to
Okay,
where we
okay.
ultimately will come up with some steps and
Okay.
some methods for
Okay.
doing that. What we want to focus on now is understanding
Yeah.
what we're visually doing here, that we're trying to figure out how many 3/4 there are in 2.5.
Okay.
But we will be getting to next class. We're going to be coming up with some
Okay.
steps and a method that you'll be able to use. But we're starting with the visual so that we understand what we're actually doing when we divide fractions. But yeah, good question. All right, so here are 5 problems that you are going to practice on here. Now, for each one of these, they've already given you the visual picture. Like when I was drawing my visual picture up here, they've already given it to you. And you're going to use that visual to help you in answering the question. So let's kind of look at number 1 together. We're not going to work it all out. We're going to kind of get started on it together here and just discuss it. All right, so number 1 says, a scoop holds 3/4 of a cup. How many scoops of birdseed are needed to fill a bird feeder that holds 3.5 cups of birdseed? Use fraction circles or the drawing below to solve this problem. So if we look at the circles that they're showing us here, the amount that's shaded in these circles represents what fraction, or what whole and what fraction?
3.5.
3.5, right? We got 3 fully filled in, and then we got half of one filled in. So that's representing our bird feeder that holds 3.5 cups of birdseed. Now they tell us that a scoop holds how much?
3/4.
3/4. So if you're going to be looking at 3/4, you're going to be breaking each one of these circles up into how many parts? Into 4 parts, right? And how many of those 4 parts are going to represent one scoop?
3.
Say it again.
3 of them.
3, right? 3 out of those 4 parts are going to represent one scoop. So what I would recommend you maybe doing is grabbing some markers or colored pencils out of the pencil boxes there, and you can shade them in different colors like I was doing. Now you don't have to do that. You can count them in another way. But to me, if you're shading in each, 3/4 of a scoop a different color at the end, you can see how many different scoops there are. And then don't forget about, you got to think about how much is left over at the end as well. And how can we describe that fraction that is left over at the end. So go ahead and get started on number 1. Again, they've given you the visuals this time. You are just using those visuals to help you in answering the question there. And again, they're saying, you have 3/4 of a cup, that equals a scoop, and you're trying to figure out how many scoops am I going to have to use to make up 3.5 total cups to fill my bird feeder with bird seed there. Think about how many full servings did you have? Well, you had how many full ones? Where do you get the 5th one? But you don't have this amount, right? Because you only have this. So you had how many full servings? You had 4 full servings, right? And think about how much did you have left over here?
Half.
So you had half, or how many fourths would that be?
4 half.
Well, think about if you had this split up into fourths, you have how many of the fourths there?
3 4.
Well, that you have that are shaded in here that you have. Remember, you only have what's shaded in here. This is how much birdseed you have that you're filling up there. So you have the 4 you showed, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. But then you have how many fourths here?
2.
2 fourths, right? Now, how many fourths do you need to make a full serving?
3.
Yeah, so think about, this entire thing here would be your full serving. So that full serving there has how many parts?
3.
And you have how many of those 3 parts shaded in? 2 out of the 3, right? So that would be what fraction?
It's gonna be 4 here and 2 4.
Well, the serving was how many parts though?
3.
So 2 out of
2 3.
2 out of 3 parts, 2/3. Exactly. Yep. So the only thing to think about here is, you're right, you have these two left over, right? Which is 2/4 of a cup, right? But we need to think about the serving size, which is the scoop. How much is in each scoop there? How many fourths are in a scoop? 3/4, right? So you have 2 out of the 3/4 that you need for the scoop. So yeah, it's going to be that you have 2/3 there, because 3 of those parts would make up another full scoop. You only have 2 of those 3 parts you need there. Yes, ma'am. Alright, so that's morning. So how many full 3/4 do you have? Well, think about it, if you have a 4th here, though, a 4th there, and another 4th, is that another 3/4? Okay, you have 4, right? And then how much do you have left over here? 2/4, right? Well, what we got to think about is how many fourths is another scoop? What do they say the size of the scoop is? How many fourths? So you have 2 out of the 3 you would need for another scoop, right?
Yeah.
So how would we represent that as a fraction then? Think about, you would need all of these 3 shaded in to have another scoop, right? But you only have how many of those parts? Out of how many? How many parts make up the? Well, you only need, but the scoop is only how many? 3/4, right?
Yeah.
So these 3 make up your full scoop, right? And you have how many out of those 3 shaded in? How many out of those 3 are shaded in right there? 2 out of how many? 2 out of 3, right? So how would we write that as a fraction? Think about how many holes you had first. How many hole times did it go? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, no, that's good now. Sometimes I think that she gets pushed in. All right, so let's take a look at number 1 together here. If you've been in class, you started working on it there. If not, we'll kind of look through this one together. It'll be a good review and check. People that already worked on it. If not, it'll be good to move over it there. So they're telling us that a scoop holds 3/4 of a cup, and they're asking how many scoops of birdseed are needed to fill a bird feeder that holds 3/4 cups of birdseed. It says use fraction circles of the drawings below to solve this problem. So we're trying to fill a bird feeder that holds 3.5 cups of birdseed. So imagine that we have a bucket of birdseed and we got a scoop that holds 3/4 of a cup. So every time I put the scoop in, I'm picking up 3/4 of a cup there. We're trying to figure out how many of those scoops am I going to need to be able to fill this bird feeder that holds 3.5 cups of birdseed. So if we look at our circles up here, we have how many circles fully shaded in? 3, and then we have how much of a circle shaded in? A half, right? So that represents our 3.5 cups of birdseed that we need. What we're trying to figure out is how many 3/4 are going to make up that 3.5. How many of those scoops are we going to have to use to be able to fill this bird feeder here? So if we want to break each of these circles up into fourths so that we can think about 3/4, if we're breaking each circle up into fourths, we're going to break each circle up into how many parts? If we're breaking it up into fourths, we want to break each circle up into how many parts?
4 parts.
4 parts, right? So we're going to take each circle and break it up into 4 parts. So we can think about it as fourths. Okay, so I've taken each circle and I've broken it up into 4 parts there. Now, how many fourths of a cup do they say is 1 scoop? How many?
3/4.
3/4, right? So I'm going to start shading in 3/4 of a cup. So let's see, I'm going to have to shade in how many of these parts to represent 3/4?
3 of them.
3 of them, right? So there's 3/4. So there's one scoop. Now, I still have one left over, so there's another 4th. So I can take that and then I can say, okay, here's 2/4. There's another 3/4, so that's another scoop right there. I can say, okay, I got a 4th here, another 4th there, and then another 4th, that's another 3/4. And then lastly, I can say, okay, I got a 1, 2, and 3 there. So see that with each color, I've shaded in 3 parts, because each one of those is representing 3/4 of a cup, which is 1 scoop. So we see, okay, we got 1 scoop there, my black scoop, 2 scoops there, my red scoop, 3 scoops here, my green scoop, and then 4 scoops there, my blue scoop. So how many full scoops have I used so far?
4.
I've used 4 full scoops so far. But if I've done that, is my bird feeder completely full yet?
No.
No, it's not completely full yet, right? So we need all of these circles ultimately filled, or all 3.5 of these filled to fill the bird feeder, because it holds 3.5 cups of bird seed there. So what we need to think about is how many more cups do I need to fill in here? How much of a cup do I still need to fill in here to fill in the entire bird feeder?
2/3.
Let's think about how much of a cup. How much of a cup? So we're thinking about this is 1 entire cup. We've broken it up into 4ths. How many cups do I still need to fill in there? Half, or if we think about it as 4ths, that would be how many 4ths? 2/4, right? Now, what we want to think about is what a full scoop is. It tells us that a scoop holds how much of a cup?
3/4.
3/4 of a cup, right? Meaning that a scoop holds this amount right here. That is showing my 3/4. That is showing my 3/4 right there, because we can think about, okay, you know, if I kind of dot this part in right there, that circle is my entire hole. We're talking about this 3/4 right here is 1 scoop. So what we want to think about is, we know that it's 4 full scoops so far. We got to think about what fraction of a scoop is going to be needed to fill in that last part right there. So we said we have how many 4ths of a cup still to fill there? How many 4ths? 2/4 of a cup still to fill here, right? So there's 1 of those 4ths, there's 2 of those 4ths right there. Now, how many 4ths make up a full scoop, though?
3/4.
3/4, right? So these 3 parts are my full scoop. 1, 2, 3. That's my full scoop there. Out of those 3 parts, how many of those are shaded in?
2/3.
2 out of those 3. So we have 2/3 of a scoop that we still need. We still need another 2/3 of a scoop. So we would need 4 whole scoops and then 2/3 of a scoop there. Because again, the way we're answering this question is not how many cups do we need, because they tell us how many cups we need. We need 3.5 cups. We're trying to figure out how many scoops are we going to have to use to be able to fill that 3.5 cups right there. So we're looking at how many 3/4 are there in 3.5. So we started off by taking our 3.5 and we broke it up into 4ths. And then we started seeing, okay, putting those in 3/4. We got 3/4 there, another 3/4 there, another 3/4 there, another 3/4 there. So that's 4 full 3/4. But then it's not completely filled yet. We got this left over. We still need to fill this in right here as well. So we think about what our scoop holds, which we said our scoop holds 3/4 of a cup. So if I was able to fill this all 3 parts of these in, I would have another full scoop there. But we only have to fill in 2 out of those 3 parts right there. So we have to fill in 2/3 of that scoop there. We need another 2/3 of a scoop to be able to fill this bird feeder in right here. So we think about the division that we're doing. We took 3.5, that's how many cups of bird seed we needed, and we divided it by 3/4. Because the way we're thinking about division here is we're thinking about how many 3/4 are there in 3.5. How many 3/4 make up 3.5 here? And we see that there were 4 full 3/4, and then there was 2/3 of another scoop, 2/3 of another 3/4 there as well. So if we do 3½ divided by 3/4, that means our answer would be what? 4 2/3. It goes in there 4 2/3 times. Now, as I've talked about, a little bit earlier in class, right now we're focusing on a visual model to help us understand dividing fractions. We're building up to ultimately having some steps and a method to be able to divide fractions. What we want to think about right now is when we're dividing fractions, we're thinking about how many blank are there in blank. In this case, we're thinking about how many 3/4 are there in 3½ How many 3/4 are there in 3½ And there are 4 3/4 and then 2/3 of 3/4 right there. So when we take 3½ and divide it by 3/4, it equals 4 2/3 there. Any questions or anything we're left wondering about number 1 there? All right, now for number 2, you are going to work on this one, but just to look at the problem together real quick. You bought 2 1/6 pints of ice cream from Ben & Jerry's for your party. You plan on serving each friend about 2/6 of a pint. How many full servings can you dish out? What part of a serving is left? Draw a picture of your solution below. So, you buy a total of how many pints of ice cream do they say? 2 1/6, right? So if we look at our picture right here, what number is our picture here representing? The 2 1/6, right? Because we got 2 full pints, and then they've taken this last one and they've broken it up into how many parts?
6.
And we have how many of those 6 shaded in?
1.
So there's our 2 1/6 pint there. Now they say you plan on serving each friend how much? 2/6 of a pint. We're looking at how many full servings can you dish out, how many 2/6 servings can you dish out, and then how much of a serving are you going to have left as well? What part of a serving is left? So you're going to want to take each one of these pints that are whole and break them up into how many parts?
6.
6 parts. So you can start, dishing out those 2/6 of the pints there. So again, you're going to want to break each one of these holes up into 6 parts. And I would grab some colored pencils, some markers like I was doing up there, and I would shade in my different, 2/6 there to see how many full servings there's going to be. And then think about what part of a serving is left. Not what part of a pint is left, but what part of a serving. What fraction of a serving do you have left there? So go ahead and work on number 2. If you finish up number 2, go ahead and flip onto the back. Continue looking at numbers 3, 4, and 5 there as well. Saying that's how many full servings there are. Where do you get 9?
I just divided all of them up into 6, and I divided them by 3.
But over here, you only have this part that's shaded in, right? 'Cause you only have 2 1/6 pints there. So you're right that these 2 are full, right? Those are full pints, right? And you're saying you could divide each one of those up into how many?
6.
Okay, you could divide them up into 6 parts, right? Now, how many of those parts do you need to serve one person, though?
2.
2, right? So if you look at this pint would serve how many people?
It would serve
If you just look up 3, this one would serve
3.
3. So that's how many people you've served so far.
6.
Now remember, over here, you only have this part that's shaded in there.
Not the one that's not shaded.
You only have the part that's shaded in there. So what you want to think about is how much of a serving is this right here? Which how many of those parts did you say would serve one person? 2 of those. So I would draw kind of like a box around 2 parts right there.
Or right here, even though this is not shaded?
Well, because you're saying if you have this would serve another person, right?
Yeah.
Both of those were shaded in. So kind of just draw a big rectangle around those 2 parts there. And now what do I think about? So if this was both shaded in, that would serve another person, right? But what fraction of that whole is shaded in?
Only half.
Half, right? So that's how much of a serving? If only half of it shaded in, that would be exactly 6.5, exactly, because you have half of a serving there. Yep, you can serve 6 full people, and then you had a half of a serving. Because if that other one was shaded in, you have another full serving, but only half of it shaded in, exactly. Good morning. Yes, ma'am. So you're saying, like, 2 of those would be one person, you're saying? Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. So 6 full servings, you're saying each one of these would be 3? Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. Yep, so you'd have 6 full servings. But then lastly, what we have to think about, and then you're saying this is half of a serving? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you could serve 6 full people, right, and then you have half of a serving left. Because you would need both of those shaded in for the full serving. You only have half of that amount. So let's see, so that one was good. Think back about this one here. You're on the right track there, but think about how many full times a half goes in there, and then what you have left over. And look back at that one. That one's good. The front one's good. Okay, so that's good. Now, if we think about, this is 1/6 of a pint, right? But how much of a serving is that? How many of these parts would have to be shaded in to have another full serving? 2 of them, right? But you only have 1 out of those 2 parts shaded in. So you have how much of a serving? Half, right? So you have 6 full servings, and then not 1/6 of a serving, but half of a serving. Because you have 1/6 of a pint, but we're looking at it as servings. Now for this one, you want to think about, you're starting off with how much shaded in are they showing? Well, how much are they showing shaded in? 3/4, right? And you're trying to figure out how many halves are there in 3/4. So how many halves would it take to make up that 3/4 there, is what you want to think about. Yep, so when you finish on the 2, flip on the back. All right, so to look at number 2 here together. So number 2 is saying you bought 2 1/6 pints of ice cream from Ben and Jerry's for your party. You plan on serving each friend about 2/6 of a pint. How many full servings can you dish out? What part of a serving is left? Draw a picture of your solution below. Explain your solution in words. So according to our picture here, they're showing what mixed number is shaded in here. What whole number and fraction is shaded in? 2 1/6, right? We got 2 pints completely, and then we got 1/6 of a pint. Now you're planning on serving each person how many, or how much of a pint? 2/6 of a pint. So we need to break each one of these pints up into how many parts? 6, right? So I'm going to go. We're going to imagine these are all equal. So I've broken my 2 full pints up into 6, and they already have, the 1/6 of the pint right there. So how many of these 6 parts am I going to shade in to show serving for 1 person? 2, right? So that would be 1 person there, Here's another person. Another person. Another person. Another person. And another person. So how many total servings do I have there? If I count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to be able to serve how many people a full serving?
6.
I have 6 full servings, right? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 full servings because each of those 2 6 there, you know, I got 6 full servings. Now, what I need to think about next is how much I have left over. Now, we want to think about this right here would be another full serving, right? If I was able to have that entire 2 6 shaded in there, that would be another full serving. So that's my whole now. That's my full serving. But if I think about that, how much of that whole do I have shaded in? I have half of it. So I have 6 1/2 servings. I have my 6 full servings right here, and then I have a half of a serving. Because if both of those were shaded in, I have another full serving. I can serve a 7th person. But I only have half of that serving shaded in. So I only have 6 1/2 servings. So if I think about the division we're doing here, we're taking 2 1/6, we're dividing it by 2 6, because what we're thinking about is how many 2 6 are there in 2 1/6? How many 2 6 are there in 2 1/6? And we saw that there were how many 2 6 in 2 1/6?
6.5.
There were 6 1/2, right? We have our 6 full 2 6, and then we have a half of a 2 6 right there as well, which is the 1/6 of the pint that we have. So again, we're using these visual models to help us really visualize what we're doing when we're dividing fractions. And now we're thinking about how many blank are there in blank. How many 2 6 are there in 2 1/6 there. Alright, so when you flip on over to number 3, use the pictures to solve each problem, write a number sentence for each one. How many halves are there in 3/4 of a circle? So if you look at number 3, they've shaded in what fraction of this circle? 3/4, right? And you're trying to think about how many halves are there in 3/4. How many halves make up that 3/4 there? So go ahead and continue working on numbers 3, 4, and 5, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes as you finish up. Remember, for number 3, you're thinking about how many halves are there in 3/4 of a circle? Alright, so we think about the 3/4 here, right? How many halves are there in that 3/4? Show me where you would have 1/2 of the circle. What would 1/2 of that circle look like? Well, no, what would visually? Remember, we're visualizing for now. What would half of that circle be? Well, 2 halves would be a whole. So draw on here. Draw me half of the circle. Show me how you would draw half of that circle. Okay. So that means you have you have a whole half shaded in here. You have a whole half shaded in, and then this right here is what fraction of a half. But you want to think about what is that as far as a half. If this entire thing over here is another half, how much of another half do you have over there? But how much of a half? You're just thinking about this half right here now. How much of a half do you have shaded in there? But this isn't a half, right? That's a 1/4. You're saying there's 3/4 there, which they've told us there's 3/4. We're looking at how many halves are there. So you told me this right here is 1/2, right? So let's cover that up. Don't even think about that for now. So just look at the other side. That other side would be another half, right? But how much of that half is shaded in? So half of it is shaded in, right? So you have 1 full half, and then how much of a half? How much of a half is that shaded in there? Right? So half of a half, right? See, it went in there one, you had one full half there, yep. Mhm, 1 1/2. Now think about what your number sentence would look like. Think about what are you actually dividing by what there? Alright, so what do you think?
I was thinking that 1, 2 is equal to.
Okay, or it equals the half.
And then, since this is didn't shade in, we only have 1, so this is half of it.
But what we want to think about that is because you're on the right track there thinking about it. But imagine that you're right that there's one whole half, right? But then let's just cover that up. And let's just focus on this over there being a half. So if that is now your whole, you have how much of that?
So this is
Mm-hmm.
upon the whole?
Yeah, so if those two are the whole, those two parts are the whole, you have how many of those two parts shaded in?
Wait, so was I right about? Oh,
And you're right about the one whole, right? We have one whole half right
this
here.
is the whole, yeah.
That's a whole half. We're looking at what fraction of a half do we have over here?
It's half.
Okay, so we have one whole half, and then,
I put 25.
but we're dealing with fractions right now, right? So you have one whole half, and then a half. Because you have the one whole half, and then you have a half.
Gotcha.
So you would have 1 1/2. Because we're thinking about how many halves are there in 3/4, which there's one whole half right here,
Oh.
and then you have a half of another one there.
Makes sense.
So how'd you go about getting the 2/4 there? Because we're looking at how many halves are there in 3/4. So show me where the half would be. Where would half of that circle be? Okay, so that's your one whole half, right? So you have one whole half there, and then you have how much left over. If we look at this other half here, so kind of ignore the half you just counted. How much of a half do we have right there?
That's 1.
Say it again.
It's not, that's half of a half.
Okay, so you have as far as how many halves are there in 3/4, there's one whole half, and then you said how much of a half? Half. So you have 1 1/2. Because you have the one full half, and then you have a half of one, as you said. But so you want to think about putting them in groups of 3. So there's 3/4, there's 3/4. Okay, so 4. And then think about, if this right here would be another 3/4, so I cover up this part and you just look at those 3 parts, that would be another 3/4. How many of those 3 parts do you have shaded in? 2/3, exactly. Because you have 2 of those 3 parts in the middle. Because if you had a third one shaded in, you'd have a whole other part there. How'd you get the 9? But we're looking at how many groups of 3/4 are there in 3 1/2 circles. So this 3 would be one group. That 3 would be another group. That 3 would be another group. But then you gotta think about, you have these 3 left over as well. Well, would that make a whole other group?
Yes.
Okay, and then think about what fraction of a group you have left over here. Well, it's half of a circle, but we're thinking about groups of 3/4. So you gotta figure out what fraction of 3/4 that would be. Thinking about breaking that up into fourths and thinking about 3/4 now as the new whole. Alright, so let's take a look at 3 and 4, and then we'll give you a couple more minutes to work on number 5 as well. We'll talk about it for a second. So how many halves are there in 3/4 of a circle? So if we think about here, what fraction are they showing us shaded in?
They showed us 3/4.
3/4, right? We have the entire whole, they've broken it up into 3/4, and they've shaded in 3/4 right there. What we're looking for is how many halves are there in 3/4 of a circle. So what I would think of, if I want to half this circle, how do I break this circle in half? What do I do?
3 and 2.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just kind of breaking it down in half, right? So that would be half. If I shade in those two, that is half of the circle. So how many full halves do I have there then?
1.
That's 1 full half. But do I still have some shaded in left over there? Now, we have to think about, if I was able to shade in both of these parts here, would that be another full half? So it's 2 parts to my half there. How many of those 2 parts do I have shaded in? I have 1 out of those 2 parts, right? So I have another half of a half shaded in. Because what we're thinking about is we're thinking about how many halves are there in 3/4 of a circle. So we start off with our 3/4 of a circle, and we're looking for how many halves are there in there. So I have my 1 full half right here, but then I also have another half of a half. Because if this entire circle was shaded in, there would be 2 halves in there. 2 halves make up the whole there. But we're looking at how many halves are there in 3/4 of a circle. So I have my 1 half here, plus I have another half of a half there. So another half would be 2 parts, and I have 1 of those 2 parts shaded in there. So when we think about what our division problem is here, we said 3/4 divided by 1/2. Because again, the way we're talking about division is how many halves are there in 3/4. We're taking the number we're dividing by, and we're thinking how many of those are there in the number we're dividing. So how many halves are there in 3/4? So 3/4 divided by half then would equal what? 1.5. If we take 3/4 and we divide it by a half, it's going to be 1.5. Because there are 1.5 halves in 3/4 there. All right, now number 4 is actually similar, I think, to one of the word problems we worked on the front here. But how many groups of 3/4 are there in 3.5 circles? So how many circles do we currently have shaded in?
3.
How many circles?
3.5.
3.5, right? We have 3.5 circles represented here. If we're wanting to break them up into groups of 3/4, we're going to have to break each one of these circles up into how many parts? 4 parts, right? So I'm going to do that here. All right, and how many of those parts is going to equal one of our groups we're talking about?
3.
3, right? So we're putting them in groups of 3/4. So let's see, I'm going to shade those 3. That's one group. I got this one right here. These 2 right there. That's another 3. That's 2. I got this one right here. This one right here. This one right here. That's another group. That's 3. And then I have 1, 2, 3. That's another group. That's 4. So how many full groups are there?
4.
4. But then I have some left over as well. Now what we have to think about for what I have left over is we have to think about what the group size is. The group size is 3/4 right here. So let me shade this. Let's start. So this 3/4 represents my group size. I've taken the circle, I've broken it up into 4s. These 3/4 here represent my group. Now, out of that group, how many parts of it are shaded in according to what we have left over?
Two.
Two of those, right? So this one and that one is shaded in. Now, we think about how many parts make up my group, though.
Three.
There are 3 parts that make up my group, and out of those 3 parts, how many of them are shaded in?
Two.
2. So I have what fraction of a group then?
4.
4 and 2/3. I have 4 full groups, and then I have 2/3 of a group left there. So we think about our division, we're doing 3½ divided by 3/4. We're thinking about how many 3/4 are there in 3½, which we said there are how many 3/4 in 3½?
Oh, 4 to 2.
4 and 2/3. So 3½ divided by 3/4 equals 4 and 2/3. Now for number 5, and I'm going to give you a few more minutes to work on number 5 here. It says you have 1 1/8 cups of M&M candies. You package them into a 1/4 cup baggies. How many baggies can you make? Include fraction of a package in your answer. So if we're looking at what value is shaded in currently, what is our mixed number that's represented by what's shaded in here? What's our mixed number that's represented by shaded in here? 1 1/8, right? Because we have one hole shaded in, and they've broken this other hole into 8 parts, and one of those 8 parts are shaded in. So that represents the 1 1/8 cup of M&M's candies that you have. Now, they tell us that we're putting them in baggies that are how much of a cup?
1/4.
A quarter or 1/4 of a cup. So we're going to want to break this hole up into how many parts then?
8.
Well, we're talking, why 8 if we're breaking them up into a 1/4 of a cup? If they're putting them into a 1/4 of a cup, we're going to want to break this part up into what? This hole up into how many parts? 4 parts, right? Because they're putting how much in each baggie? 1/4 of a cup, right? So we're going to want to take that and break it up into a 1/4. If this is a whole cup, we're going to want to take that and break it up into 4ths there. So you're going to think about how many full baggies are there and what fraction of a baggie is left over. Take a few more minutes to work on that one. Remember, for number 5, y'all just told me we want to break that hole up into how many parts? 4 parts, right? And it may help to visualize it if you break it up in 4 parts vertically. Here, look back at number 5 there. Again, we said if we're putting them in 1/4 of a cup baggies, we're going to want to break it up into 4 parts. And it may help to break those 4 parts up horizontally, going straight across. It may help you visualize it that way. Not that you have to do it that way, but it can help you visualize it. What I mean by that is think about, drawing your 4 parts like this. And that may help you visualize the division here. shaded in, that would be another whole, right? For the whole cup, you only have half of that amount shaded. Exactly.
Okay.
All right, so if we look at number 5 here, it says you have 1 1/8 cups of M&M candies. You package them into a 1/4 of a cup baggies. How many baggies can you make? Include fraction of a package in your answer there. So we see that they have 1 1/8 shaded in here. They had one whole rectangle, and then they had 1/8 of a rectangle shaded in there as well. Now they told us that we're packaging them into what size cup baggies, or how much of a cup is in a bag? A 1/4 of a cup, right? So we want to take our whole then and break it up into how many parts? 4 parts, right? And if we do that, we would see, okay, here's one baggie. There's another baggie. Here's another baggie. And here is another baggie. So how many full bags have we filled up there? 4. Now, if we think about how much we have left over there, we can think about, okay, if I was to split, this up into 4ths, there's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So we think about this up here now representing another bag, right? If we have this filled in, that would be another bag. How much of a bag do we have filled in there then? Half of it, right? We have half of the amount we need. If both of these were shaded in, that would be another full bag. That would be another 1/4 of a cup there. But we only have 1/8 of a cup, so we only have half of what we need there. So we have 4 full bags, and then we would have a half of a bag there. We don't have enough to fill up another full bag. We would only have half the amount that we need there. So if we think about 1 1/8 divided by 1/4, how many 1/4 are there in 1 1/8? There are how many 1/4 in 1 1/8? 4.5. There are 4.5 1/4. And we got 1, 2, 3, 4 1/4, and then we got a half of 1/4 right there, because that entire thing would be a 1/4, but we have half of that right there. We have a half of a 1/4. So the important takeaway for what we're working on here is that we're thinking about division with fractions. We're really thinking about how many blank are there in blank. How many 1/4 are there in 1 1/8? How many 3/4 are there in 3.5? That's what we're really thinking about and want to visualize when we're working with fractions. I'm working with dividing with fractions here. So any questions about those visual models that we've looked at here? And like I've said, we're starting off with some visual models so that we understand the concept of dividing with fractions. And we're building upon, ultimately, where we will have some more concrete, where we have put together some steps and a method that makes sense to you for dividing fractions. All right, so we're going to look at one more visual model today. So for this, everybody is going to need some pattern blocks. Now, there are the pattern blocks at the end there. Some of them are already broken up into baggies, possibly. I got a couple of baggies here. We may not have to make any. Here's a, you'll just make sure that goes back up front here. Here's one more baggie. So, and if you want to grab 1 yellow hexagon, 2 reds, 3 blues, and 6 greens. So everybody double check to make sure you have what you need in your bags, to make sure they're all still correct. So everybody should have 1 yellow. You should have 2 reds. You should have 3 blues and 6 greens. So just double check the contents of your bag there. Make sure you have 1 yellow, 2 reds, 3 blues, and 6 greens. That's what we're going to need for this activity here. So we're going to use the pattern blocks to show division and give us another visual to help us understand what we're doing when we are dividing fractions. So again, you need 1 yellow, you need 2 reds, 3 blues, and 6 greens. Now, if we look at the top of the handout I've given you there, it says Activity 1, Pattern Block Division. So we're going to use the pattern blocks to explore these questions. We're going to use the pattern blocks to explore these questions and to explore division with fractions. Now, for this activity, the yellow hexagon will have a value of 1. So everybody grab the yellow hexagon. The yellow hexagon is going to equal 1. It's going to equal 1 whole. So let's think first of all, how many green triangles make up one yellow hexagon? 6. So that means each green triangle is going to have a value of what? What's the fractional value of each green triangle going to be? 1/6, right? Each one is going to equal 1/6 there. So where it says a green triangle at the top, what is the value of a green triangle? Each green triangle equals what? 1/6. Because again, the hexagon, the yellow hexagon equals the whole. It takes 6 of those green triangles to make up the whole. So each one of those represents 1/6. And you should fill this in, at the top there where it's saying what is the value of the green triangle. Y'all just told me is a 6. Now how many red trapezoids make up the yellow hexagon? 2. So each one of those red trapezoids is going to have a value of what? Half of 1/2. And how many blue parallelograms does it take to make up the yellow hexagon? 3. So each blue parallelogram is going to have a value of what? Say it again. 1/3. Each one is going to have a value of 1/3 there. So the green triangle is a 6. So it takes 6 of those to make the whole. The red trapezoid is a 1/2. So it takes 2 of those to make the whole. The blue parallelogram is a 1/3. So it takes 3 of those to make the whole. Now, we're going to do an example together what we are going to be doing with these. So the question is, how many triangles are in 2 hexagons? So go ahead and real quickly figure out how many triangles would it be in 2 hexagons. Draw my hexagons up here. Okay. So how many hexagons would it take to make up 2, or not hexagons, excuse me. How many green triangles would it take to make up 2 yellow hexagons?
12.
Take a total of 12 there. So what you're going to do is you're going to start by answering the question. In this case, the question is, how many triangles are in 2 hexagons? There are 12 triangles. Then what you're going to do is you are going to draw a picture to show it there. So what I'm going to do is I have my 2 hexagons here. I'm just going to show how it breaks up into my 12 green triangles here. Now, what is the value of each one of these green triangles? 1/6, right? So I'm going to label each one of them 1/6 right here. And then the next thing they want you to do is, where it says math symbols, that's where you need to come up with the equation that you're solving using those division, or using those pattern blocks. Because that's the important part, is realizing what equation we're representing with this problem right here. So if we're looking at how many triangles are in 2 hexagons, how can we write that division problem out? What do y'all think our division problem is going to look like here? We're thinking about how many triangles are in 2 hexagons.
2 divided by 1/6.
Okay, so we have the 2 yellow hexagons, right, which represents 2 whole, and we're dividing it by what?
I don't understand. 1/6.
1/6. Because what we're thinking about is how many green triangles, which is our 1/6, are there in 2 yellow hexagons, which is or they're in 2 hexagons, which is our 2 holes there. So we're taking 2 and we're dividing it by 1/6. We're looking at how many 1/6 are there in 2, and how many 1/6 did we see there are in 2? How many? 12. There are 12 1/6 in 2 there. So we have another visual seeing that when we do 2 divided by 1/6. How many 1/6 are there in 2? We see that there are 12 1/6 that make up 2 there. Now, you can skip part D where it says show another way to explain the answer. We're going to skip that part for today. But what you're going to do is question numbers 1 and 2, they've given you a specific one. And then for number 3, you're going to be coming up for one on your own. But for each one, you're going to come up with the answer. You're going to come up with your picture that you're going to draw on there. And then you're going to put the math symbols. That's where you're actually coming up with the equation that is being represented by the pattern block division that you're doing there. Any questions on those directions? All right, so go ahead and get started working on numbers 1, 2, and 3. So again, for numbers 1 and 2, they've given you a particular one to figure out. And then for number 3, they want you to come up with your own question. Well, now this one's saying how many triangles are in 2 parallelograms. Yeah. Now, sorry. Now for this one, this is how many parallelograms are in a trapezoid. So that's saying, yeah, so up here, so green triangle, red trapezoid, blue parallelogram, yellow hexagon, yeah. Yeah, and if you're not sure about the shape name, remember it tells you at the top what color each shape is as well. So we got the yellow hexagon, the red trapezoid, the blue parallelogram, and the green triangle there. All right, so this one you're looking at how many parallelograms are there in a trapezoid. So we're saying how many parallelograms are in a trapezoid? So how many parallelograms are in a trapezoid? Just one. So it's one whole one, and then how much of a parallelogram is that? What fraction of a parallelogram is that?
Half.
Okay. So your answer wouldn't just be 1, but it would be 1 and 1. Well, think about, so you're seeing that, you're looking at how many triangles are in 2 of these, right? So each one of these has a value of what? Each blue parallelogram has a value of what? Okay, so if you have 2 of those, you have what fraction? So you said each one of these is a third, right? But you have two of those, you have how many thirds? Okay, and you're dividing it by what? 1/6, right? You're thinking about how many 1/6 are there in 2/3. So that would be your math symbols, your equation there. And how many 1/6 were there in 2/3? Now we think about how many blue parallelograms, right? So how many of these blues make up one of the red? 3 of these blue make up one red? I think so. Okay, so what's your answer then? You just told me your answer. Why are you saying third? You just told me 1.5 of these. Because how many parallelograms are in a trapezoid? One whole parallelogram, and then how much of a parallelogram? And half of one is that. Now, so how many of the blue parallelograms? So how many parallelograms are in a trapezoid? So how many of them are there? What does that completely cover it up? So how much of another one are you going to need? By how much of that one would you need? Do you need the whole thing? You just said you can't use the whole thing. Okay, so that means how many blue parallelograms are there? One whole one, and then how much of one? So that's your answer, though, right? Because how many parallelograms are in a trapezoid? It's not just one. It's one and how much? You just told me. What would you? Your answer is a 1, your answer is 1.5, right? And so then you're just going to draw your picture where you're showing that, 1.5. And then you got to put it into your equation. Think about what is the division you're actually doing there. Remember, when it's asking for math symbols, they're asking for the division equation. It's great if you can figure out how many of a shape make up another, but the reason we're doing this is a visual to help us understand fraction division. You got to think about what is the fractional value of the pieces that you're looking at here. Now, were we looking at how many halves are there in a third, or how many thirds were there in a half? Now, when you're thinking about your math symbols, make sure you're paying attention to the order, because order matters in division. And we're talking about, here we're thinking about how many blank are there in blank. Remember, the number that we're dividing by is the how many of the blank that we're looking at in the number that we are dividing there. Okay, so here you just, so the picture, you're just going to draw your picture. You can trace these to draw your picture. When we're doing for our division, what did we start off with? One of these, right? Which is a value of what? And you were dividing it by what? And it equaled what? Okay, so that's what your math symbols are. Remember, guys, your math symbols is the equation, the division equation. Think about the division equation I wrote up here and that I showed up here and that they did in your example. So remember, in this example, we started off with 2 yellow hexagons, and we were looking at how many green triangles are there in 2 yellow hexagons. So we had the 2 whole, and we divided it by the 1/6. We're looking at the 1/6, which was our green triangles, are there in 2 whole, which is our yellow hexagon there. So the most important part of this is the math symbols there, the equation, that we're relating the picture we have in our visual to our equation. think about what your math symbols is here. What's your equation that you have? Because we're looking at how many 1/6 are there in 2/3, and there are 4 exactly. Why'd you skip number 1?
Oh, what is it? It's just the back.
No, so do number 1 in the back, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, you can go back and do number 1 now. Yes, you want to do numbers 1, 2, and 3 when you know, numbers 1 and 2, they've given you a specific problem. For number 3, you're coming up with your own. But for each one, you want to have your answer, your picture, and then you want to have your math symbols equation as well. When I hear it, they want to know how many parallelograms are in a trapezoid. So how many parallelograms in one trapezoid?
Oh, okay.
And then for here, you're right that there would be 4 in 2 of these.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to think about the value of each one of these is in a half, though. What's the value of each one of these? 1/6, right? So think back about what you're dividing there. So when we think about what we were dividing here, right? What's the value of this one?
That's 1 whole.
Well, no, what do we say the value?
Oh, a half.
A half, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're dividing it by what?
This would be.
What do we say? What do we say the value? We're supposed to fill in up top here what the value of each one of these is. One number to start with. So how many of these blue make up 1 whole? So each one of those is a value of what? How much of the whole is each one of these? A fraction of the whole. You're taking the whole and you're breaking it up into how many parts? So each one of those is a fractional value of what? Where do you get 6 from? If it's breaking into 3 parts, one of these is a value of what? So that was breaking it, that was looking at the green triangles, right?
Mhm.
So you can start with those green triangles. How many green triangles does it take to fill in one of the yellow hexagons? 6 of those. So each one of these green triangles has a value of what? A value of what? 1/6, right? Each one of those is a value of 1/6. So for green triangles, you should have 1/6 filled in there. So how many blue parallelograms, or what was next, the trapezoid?
Mhm.
How many red trapezoids does it take? So each one of those is a value of what? Well, so this is the whole, right?
Mhm.
So each one of these has a fractional value of what compared to the whole? This is how much of a whole?
Okay.
Half of the whole. So how do you write that as a fraction? 1/2, right? Because each one of these is one of the two parts there.
Okay.
You're taking the whole, you're breaking it into two parts. You have one of those two parts.
Mhm.
So here, how many of these blue parallelograms does it take to make the yellow hexagon? Okay, so each one of those has a value of what? 1/3, right? Each one of those is 1/3 of the whole. So if you think back to the problem you were doing right here, you started off with this, which has a value of what? A half. So when we think about our map symbols, you had what? Start off with what? A half, okay. That's what you started off with, right? You took a half, and you divided it by what? Divided it by 1/3. And how many 1/3s made up that 1/2 then? 2 of them? 1.5. Because remember, the way we've been talking about when we think about division is we're looking at how many 1/3s are there in a half. And there are 1.5 1/3s in a half. Yeah, because there's 1 whole third, and then there's a half of 1. Because we're looking at how many 1/3s are there in a half. Well, no, how many 1/3s are there in this half right there? There are how many full 1/3s? Okay, 1.5. That's what you came up with your answer up here already. So you've already come up with the answer at the top, then you have the picture, and then you're just putting it into the math symbols, where you're coming up with your equation. So go ahead and look back at look at number 2 now, think about what they're asking you to find there. Now, where are you getting the 2/3 divided by 1/3? What are we starting off with? A red trapezoid, right? What's the value of the trapezoid? A half, right? So you're taking a half and you're dividing it by what? What do we say the value of this is? Okay, so you're taking a half and you're dividing it by 1/3. Because we're looking at how many thirds make up a half. Which we said, how many of those thirds make up a half? What was the answer? 1 1/3? What did you say for your answer? 1.5. So you're talking about a half divided by 1/3 equals what? 1/2. Or 1.5. Because it goes in there 1 full time and then a half of the time. So you have 1.5. So make sure you got your division problem written down. Well, now if we think about, where are you getting a 1/6 from? Oh, that's what you're saying. But now think about, if we think about, okay, you're right, it goes in there 1 full time, and then what fraction of another one would it use? Well, no, what fraction of this third did it use? Is it taking that whole, or how much of it is it using? half of it, right? So it goes in there 1,
And 1/2.
1.5 times.
Oh, okay. I just thought because it was like the triangle.
But yeah, because we're looking at taking a half and dividing it by a third. And we see that a third goes in there 1.5 times. Think about what your equation is down there for the symbols. So think about, what were we dividing?
We're dividing
What did you start off with? And you divided it by what?
and then I was divided by 1.
No, what did you divide it by?
1/3.
Okay, and that equaled what? How many 1/3 went into 1.5?
For this one, what I put right here.
This is, what you're putting here in math symbols is what you did up here.
Okay, so I have 1/2 and I put 1/3.
How many 1/3 went into the 1/2?
1.
And how much of 1? What was your answer you came up with?
The 1/2.
1.5. Because one full one went in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a half of one as well.
Okay.
Alright, now for number 3, they want you to come up with one of your own, where you're like, how many triangles are there in, or how many halves are there in 2/3, something like 2/6. Remember, for number 3, they want you to come up with one of your own. Now think about, what is our math equation here, though? What's the value of each one of these? So if you have 2 of those, you have how much? 2/3, right? And you're taking 2/3 and you're dividing it by what? And then it equaled what? So put what you just told me into your math symbols there. Now for this here, let's think about what we were dividing here. Here, put the book away for a second, please. Owen, put the book away for a second, please, so we can get back to this. Put the bookmark away. Put the book away. You can read later. So we need to think about, what were we dividing by what here? You started off with 2 of these, right? What's the fractional value of each one of those? What's the fractional value of each one of those? No. What's the value of each one of these here? Okay, now if you have 2 of them, though, you have what fraction? Here, you can write it right there with your math symbols. But if you got 2 of these, you have what fraction? If each one's a third, you have 2 of them, you have what? Okay, and then you divided it by one of these, which was a value of what? And then that equaled what? How many of these went into? There you go. Yep. So think about your math symbols. If you started off with 2 of these, each one of those is a fraction of what? Each blue is what fraction? Okay, so if you have two of those, you have how many thirds?
2/3.
So you took 2/3 and you divided it by what?
1/6.
And it equaled what? How many times did 1/6 go into 2/3? How many times?
2/3.
How many times did 1/6 go into 2/3? How many 1/6 made up the 2/3?
4.
Okay. So put what you just told me in math symbols there. Now, you gotta think about what the fractional value of each one of these is. And what you're dividing by there. You gotta think about what was the value of each one of these. We're gonna flip back over to the front. We said each blue parallelogram equals what? So if you have two of those, you have how many thirds? Okay, and then you're dividing by one of these, which is what? What is the value of the big triangle? What's the value of the big triangle? Okay, so you're taking 2/3 and you're dividing by what? And it equals how many? How many times does 1/6 go into 2/3? Well, you just figure it out. How many of these 1/6 made that up? Only 3 of them? You just figured it out. How many 1/6? 4. So you gotta put that in symbols there. All right, so let's take a look at these two problems that you've been working on here. And it's important that we're able to connect the visual ultimately with the math symbols that we're coming up with. Because again, we're building up to some steps, some methods to be able to divide fractions here. So if we look at number 1, how many parallelograms are in a trapezoid? So I have one red trapezoid up here, and I'm trying to see how many blue parallelograms make up that red trapezoid. So how many blue parallelograms made up that red trapezoid? Say it again.
1.
1.5. And Teresa, how'd you get that 1.5? Tell me what our picture should look like here. Well, let's think about it. If we take a blue parallelogram and cover this part up, it's going to cover that part up right there, right?
Right.
That would cover it up, and then we have this amount left over. But if we take another blue parallelogram, we would see that it takes half of that blue parallelogram right there, right? To cover it up. So it takes one whole blue parallelogram and then a half of a blue parallelogram to make a red trapezoid. So when we're thinking about how many parallelograms are there in a red trapezoid, there are 1.5 parallelograms in a red trapezoid. Now, if we think about the division that we're doing, we started off with, what was the value of the red trapezoid?
Half.
What's the fractional value? It's a half, right?
Right.
Because again, it takes 2 of those to make up the yellow hexagon, which is our whole. So it's a half, and we're dividing it by what? What is the fractional value of the blue parallelogram?
1/3.
Dividing it by 1/3, right? Because what we're thinking about is we're thinking about how many 1/3 are there in a half. That's a very important idea. When we're talking about fraction division, we're thinking about how many 1/3 are there in a half. How many 1/3 make up a half? Which we see how many 1/3 make up a half. 1 and a half, right? One whole one, and then a half of another one. Because we had one whole blue parallelogram, which was a third, and then we had another half of a blue parallelogram there. So it's very important that we're connecting the visual picture that we're making to the math symbols and equation, because that's the important part, is making that connection. Now we took a half and we thought about, we divided it by 1/3. We thought about how many thirds are there in a half. There's one full third and then a half of a third right there. So half divided by 1/3 equals 1 and a half. Now, for number 2, how many triangles are in 2 blue parallelograms? So how many triangles make up our 2 blue parallelograms? How many triangles fill that in?
4.
How many triangles are going to make the 2 blue parallelograms?
4.
4, right? So get out your 2 blue parallelograms. If you didn't get that, get out 2 blue parallelograms. And they're asking how many triangles are in 2 parallelograms. It takes 4 triangles to break up those blue parallelograms there. Because again, it's basically broken up, my picture's not perfect, but broken up like this right here. One green triangle, another green triangle, another green triangle, and another green triangle there. So how many, when they're asking us how many triangles are in 2 parallelograms, there are 4 triangles in 2 parallelograms. And you have the manipulatives, you're able to actually place those on top. And you're able to see there are 4 of these that cover up those 2 blue parallelograms. Now, what's important is that we connect that to the division problem that we're visualizing there. So each one of these blue parallelograms has a fractional value of what? Of the blue parallelograms. Each blue parallelogram has a fractional value of what? 1/3. And we have 2 of those. So we have a total of how many thirds? 2 thirds, right? Because each one of those blue parallelograms is a third. We have 1/3 and another third. So we have 2 thirds there. So we're starting off with 2 thirds. And what are we dividing it by? What is the value of our green triangle? 1/6. We're dividing it by 1/6. Because what we're trying to figure out is how many 1/6 are there in 2 thirds? How many 1/6 make up 2 thirds?
4.
Which we figured out that 4, right? 4 1/6 make up 2 thirds there. Because again, we had 2 blue parallelograms. Each one of those is a third here and a third here. So we had 2 thirds, and we're dividing it by 6. We're thinking about how many 6 are there in 2 thirds. Because that's one of the most important things we can take away from what we've talked about with fraction division so far. Now when we're visualizing and thinking about it, we're thinking about how many 1/6 are there in 2 thirds. How many 1/3 are there in a half? That's what we're thinking about with visualizing the division. And we see that there are 4 1/6 there in the 2 thirds. So you can visually see that if we take 2 thirds and divide it by 1/6, it equals 4 there, because there are 4 1/6 that make up that 2 thirds right there. That's a very important concept to understand before we move on to working with some steps and some methods for ultimately dividing fractions. All right, did anybody come up with one on their own for number 3 that we could look at as a class together real quick? So for number 3, they wanted you to come up with your own problem. How many blank are there in blank? Who can share with us what they came up with for number 3 right there? Who got one for number 3? One created one of their own. I think, Nana, you had one back there, didn't you? For number 3?
Yeah, but I just drew the picture.
Well, think about what was the shapes you were doing there. You're figuring out how many what are in what. Well, just tell me the shapes you used.
Trapezoid.
So how many what are in a trapezoid?
How many trapezoid hexagons?
How many trapezoids in hexagon?
Yeah.
All right, so how many trapezoids would it take to make up a hexagon then? Y'all tell me.
2.
2 of those, right? So we got a hexagon right here. It would take, 2 of the red trapezoids there. Now, if we think about what we are actually dividing there, what is the value of the yellow hexagon?
1 whole.
1 whole. The yellow hexagon is 1 whole, right?
Yeah.
And we're dividing it by what? dividing it by a half, and that equals what? Equals 2. Because we're thinking about how many halves are there in a whole. There are 2 halves in a whole. So if we take 1 and we divide it by a half, we are going to get 2 there. Because we're thinking about how many halves are there in a whole. And there are 2 halves in a whole there. So how many halves are there in one whole? There are 2 there. So again, that's the most important idea we can take away from what we've talked about with fraction division so far, is thinking about how many blank are there in blank. All right, so we come into class on Thursday, on Thursday we're going to continue looking at fraction division and really start to come up with some steps and some methods that make sense to us for dividing fractions. But keep in mind what we've talked about with our visuals so far, and really keep in mind that thought of how many blank are there in blank. So if y'all will put your fraction blocks back into wherever they came from, put them back in the bag and then put them just back in the container there. You'll put all your color pencils, markers, anything like that that you got out to use. If you will put those back up as well. And then you can go ahead and sign out for 10:30. And be in Miss Green's class at 10:35. And have a good rest of your day and night and day tomorrow. And I will see everybody back in class on Thursday.
It was by accident. My 3-year-old was in the bathroom with me when I was cutting my hair, because I cut my own hair down. And he took the guard off of it.
Oh, did you not know?
And it was
No.
too low.
So I was,
Oh, no.
so like literally it was like right here. And so I was like, okay, we're gonna have to turn this into like a style. At this point, like I can't afford to go to work looking crazy. So.
At least you did it like shaved like to where it was completely
See,
full.
but the thing is, my hair grows back really quick, so, like, I was, like, putting, like,
Growth
the
oil.
kaleidoscope growth oil.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
But no, my ex-husband came, and he was like, I'll fix it. I was like, oh, my God. He was like, I like it like this. I was like, look. I was like, you need to talk to your son about doing stuff to me. And my son, literally, when my son heard the noise, he was like, I was like, Jalen! He was like, we can just pick it up. Like, he started picking it up. I was like, there's nothing we can do.
How old is he?
3.
Oh.
So he was sitting there, he was like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And I was like, you know, it's hair, it'll grow back.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's not a big deal. It's just hair. We're good. But I was completely freaked out when it first fell on my shoulder because I was like, oh my God, what did I do? But it's all good. It is what it is. So I have to walk around with this little design in my hair until all my hair grows back. Well, I'll go ahead and give you guys your scope. We won't get started until Nana and them get in here. Hello, hello. Make one more copy and I'll be right back to you. Hello.
Hi.
I got engaged by your people.
That's what I'm thinking about.
I was okay, it's all good.
I know you.
Oh, it's part of the break time.
See? sure they work for you. Mm-mm. Like, you know where to find me.
Hi, Teresa.
My head hurts.
Oh, sorry.
Let me call Miss Moore. Mr. Moore, are you?
I know from, I don't know, this vision thing.
Yeah. You need shift to do fraction. I'm gonna get that done.
But the thing is, that's why I asked him. I said, if I don't visualize it, I want you to show me how to do it. You remember when I asked him that? Because that doesn't make, sometimes you can't visualize it, you know. That's not for
Yes.
everybody,
Mhm.
you know.
It's scary.
When you
That's like confusing me,
Yeah.
you know, like.
it's like you're just starting all over.
You
Right.
give me numbers,
That's why I told him, like, just show me how to do it. Just
I know
you know,
from
it's
Yeah.
nah.
the figures and usually the throws me off. If I get the answer.
But to be honest, I'd rather do math in the morning than this class.
Yeah.
Early. When I came in, I'd rather do math because in the afternoon I don't function that much. If I have to go somewhere.
I'm good.
I say it's over. You say next week.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently after this math class, we have to take another math class.
Who?
Like that's what I was, this girl Tiffany that was in our class, she said that after we complete that one, we have to take a harder one, I guess it's like with more algebra.
Yeah, algebra is different. I mean, that's like when they say A plus B is that, you know, stuff like that. But still,
I saw the work they were doing, and I'm just like, oh boy.
that's advanced.
What I'm
stuff.
scared is algebra.
The substitute.
X, Y, Z plus 2, 3x minus
Find
5.
X.
Find X.
Find Z.
We're gonna find the X too.
You'll figure it out.
Oh, how will I find the X now?
Just remember.
My head hurts, but
Teresa going to that class. Teresa going to that class. I thought your conference is on next week. So if you pass the class, you going there? I know. All the classes. If you can go ahead and do the GED, you don't even need to be in that class.
I want to register, like, to see what's going on.
I
You
know.
never know. Yeah, I need to try to do that too. But I don't know. Sometimes today I'm ready, tomorrow I'm not ready. Yeah, so I don't know when I'm going to be ready.
That is confusing. Sometimes you think you figure everything out, and the next thing you know,
Yeah.
it brings you something that makes you, you know, I don't know.
so understand and apply basic and multi-step instructions. All right, so it may be necessary to follow multi-step instructions in a variety of situations. A shipping clerk must be able to gather, pack, and ship a variety of items for delivery. According to the written instructions, workers must read carefully to know when to take each step and be able to apply the same instructions in a variety of situations. All right, so number one, as a mixer in a cosmetic factory, you are in charge of melting and mixing the raw ingredients for lipstick. According to this procedure list, when should you use the roller mill? A, immediately after adding pigment. And number two, according to the procedures list, what must be done just before the mixture is strained? D, the mixture must be agitated to remove any bubbles. All right, number three, as a machine operator in a factory that makes instant coffee, you are asked to operate the centrifuge. You read the list of the steps to the freeze drying process. What should the consistency of the coffee be before process in the centrifuge? C, 20% to 30% solid. All right, number four, the next day you are told to work on a machine that dehydrates the coffee extract. What temperature must the coffee extract achieve during the chilling process in the machine? C. No.
No?
You said C?
On board?
Yeah.
That's what I see. It says, the two, it's 40, it says, heat exchanger is cooled down to 40, Fahrenheit, and then the other one is negative 40. When it says furnace one, the resulting switch to negative 40 Fahrenheit.
So read number 5.
Oh, 20.
So it's E.
Okay.
20 to a negative 40. Yep. No big deal. Okay. So we're going to talk about a variety, the use of a variety of sentence styles. Now, when you guys get to the portion where you start writing your essay, you're going to use different sentence styles. And you're either going to learn how to shorten your sentence, lengthen, or combine them based on what you're trying to say. We don't want the sentence structure to be too choppy because that frustrates our reader. And it doesn't make the reading as clear as we would like for it to be. So, in this lesson you will learn how language changes when writing, speaking, reading, and listening. You will learn how to change the length of a sentence to give it a different meaning. You will also learn what dialect and registers are and how they are used in text. All right? So the sentence comes in different forms. The way a sentence is written can change its meaning. We often change the way we use language depending on the setting or the audience. For example, the way you write is often different from the way you speak. The way we speak to a boss is usually different from the way we speak to a friend. Also, in different places, people use different dialects and registers when writing or speaking. All right, so we know that's true, that you probably speak and act completely different, and your dialect is different when you're with your friends opposed to being in a school setting, right?
Yeah.
Even at work, it's a little different. So there's some things I'm not going to text my boss that I would text my friends. Or there's some things that I will not say around my coworkers that I might say around my friends, and vice versa. So when we change the language for different uses, people tend to use language a little differently depending on whether they are writing, speaking, reading, or listening. Compare the two sentences and think about how and where each would be used. So, somebody read the first example.
See you tomorrow morning at 9.
All right, see you tomorrow morning at 9. Read the second sentence, someone. All right, I will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. The first sentence, where do you think we use that? Writing, speaking? Speaking, right? And if the second one, we will probably use that when we're doing what? sending an email, or maybe even, we could probably, yes. So we would probably text somebody something, maybe that'll be your boss or a coworker. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m., okay? So both sentences express the same idea. The first is more conversational and more likely to be used when speaking. It is short, but in person, it would be clear who the you in the sentence is. The second sentence is longer and includes more precise detail. It's more likely to be used in a writing. It can also sound more formal out loud. So if you were speaking to your boss, that would be a good way to speak to your boss or another coworker. But if you could send it in a text or email, that would have been fine too. All right, so in language, everything depends on context. For example, the second sentence might fit when spoken in a formal conversation, such as scheduling a job interview or an appointment. Also, certain types of writing work better with informal language. Consider the following. See you tomorrow, the @ sign, 9 o'clock. When will we use that? When we're texting somebody. Yes, we keep our texts as short as we can until we're mad. And then they become essays. So this would be used for texting or quick notes to forms of writing that require less formal language, and they are faster and shorter in the nature. They tend to be less formal when writing a letter or an email because they are sent to friends and family rather than teachers or coworkers. Okay? So I necessarily wouldn't send you all something that looks like this. It would be a little bit more formal if it's coming from me or from the college. All right, on the back, we're talking about changing the length for meaning. So a lot of times whenever we read a book, if we look at some of those sentences, they are long, right? Ridiculously long. And then we think about how if they were to just shorten it or combine those sentences, how it makes so much of a difference. So we're going to talk about what that means and how it actually changes the meaning of this sentence. So changing sentence length for meaning. A good writer uses a variety of sentence lengths to create different meanings. This also helps keep the reader engaged. There are a few ways you can change sentence length to create the effects of lengthening, shortening, and combine. Lengthening a sentence can help you add details to make it more interesting for your reader. Consider the following. The girl rode her bicycle to work. The sentence has a clear idea, but adding more detail can give it context to help create a more interesting story. So the second sentence, the girl pedaled as quickly as she could on her bicycle to make it to work on time. Now we have more information why the girl's on the bike in the first place and where she's going. On the other hand, shortening a long sentence can help you make a sentence more clear or more powerful. Sometimes too many sentences can get in the way of the meaning. Consider the following. Having been sick for quite some time, she still decided to get on stage and sing at her best as she could. That's lengthy, right? But if we were to say, despite being sick, she sang her heart out on stage. Does that grab you more than the first sentence? Yes. All right, so the second sentence is clearer and focuses on the main point. That she was sick and that she is still still tried hard to sing well. By shortening the sentence and focusing on these two conflicting details, the second sentence has more of a dramatic effect, okay? We also sometimes, if we were to yell, over here, if we want one of our friends to know that we're sitting at this table, right? We're not necessarily going to say, hey, Sarah, I'm over here in the blue shirt. That's a bit much, right? And by that time, you're probably like, what are you talking about? Like, just be quiet. So yelling, hey, over here, or yelling, that is a way that we can shorten a sentence to make it more clear that, hey, this is something that needs to be done right now, and I'm trying to grab your attention. All right? So finally, we're going to talk about combining two sentences to create smoother writing. So he likes to read, he likes to write, and he likes to play the piano. Does that sentence sound smooth or choppy? very choppy, right? But if we were to combine those sentences together, we can make it sound more smooth. So he likes to read, write, and play the piano. Sounds better, right? All right, so combining sentences above include all three things that he likes to do is less choppy than the three separate sentences. Combining sentences can also help make connections between ideas. For instance, the following sentence can be combined to show that the rain in April is the reason why the speaker's garden is growing well. So someone read the first sentence for me.
It rained a lot this April. My garden is growing a lot of healthy vegetables.
Okay? Does that seem pretty clear? Kind of. Okay, read the second sentence.
Since it rained a lot this April, my garden is growing a lot of healthy vegetables.
Which sentence sounds better, first or second? The second sentence, absolutely. So it gives us kind of like a reasoning for why the vegetables are healthy. All right, so comparing dialect and registers. So the dialect up north and from the south are two different dialects, correct? Down here, we're a little bit more relaxed with our words. Up north, you can definitely tell when you have a northerner in your presence compared to a southerner. Or for instance, Nana, when I speak to you, I have a different dialect than if you were at home, you have a different dialect, right? So if Nana were to say something to me in her home dialect, I wouldn't be able to understand. But I would know she was saying something to me, try to communicate something to me, and vice versa. So dialect is something that we have to be careful about when we use it. Within the English language, people in different regions use different terms to mean the same thing. A dialect is a way of speaking that is used in a particular area. This will include vocabulary and grammar. Just like I told you all, the North and the South, we speak very different from each other. All right, but if I were to say y'all to someone who's from up north, they would still understand what I meant, correct? They might say you guys or yous, but they knew what I was saying. It was a collective, it was more than one person. All right, so dialects are often used in literature to help show where a character is from and where the scene takes place. Read the following paragraph from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. So somebody read that short scene for us.
No, I reckon it wouldn't hardly do. Then, you see, Aunt Polly's awful particular about this fence, right here on the street, you know. But if it was the back fence, I wouldn't mind, and she wouldn't. Yes, she's awful particular about the fence. It's got to be done very careful, very careful. I reckon there ain't one boy in 1,000, maybe 2,000 that can do it the way it's got to be done.
Okay, so let's review the underlined words. What's the first underlined word we see?
Reckon.
Reckon. What's the other one? Awful. What's the other one we see? It's got to. And what's the last one? Ain't. So where do we think this takes place? In the north, south, east, or west?
South.
The south. And how do we know that?
The reckon.
The reckon and the ain't. So those are words that we typically hear. We think it's normal, right? But I'm not necessarily going to send you a text, or I'm not going to send you an email that says, well, we ain't got your test ticket together. You're probably going to be like, that must be a spelling error. Something's going on with Miss Green this morning. So we have to be very careful with how we use dialect. But dialect can definitely let us know where someone comes from, so we're a little bit more understanding when we're talking to them. Another way language can vary is by register. A register is a level of formality in language. As you learned in example 1, your formality often needs to change depending on your audience and purpose. So when you're with your friends, you're probably as informal as you possibly can be. Okay? When you get around your parents, your formality comes back, decently. When you're at school or at work, in front of your peers, in front of your teachers, in front of your boss, you become very what? Structured and formal, right? So you know that there's certain things that you can't say, or ways that you cannot present yourself or talk. And that's what we mean by a register. So we have to know our level of formality. So formal language typically uses full sentences and correct grammar. Informal language may use abbreviations, contractions, and slang. and improper grammar. Generally, formal language is less personal. So formal language is very objective. Okay, it's not subjective at all. So we leave a lot of our emotions out when we're being directly formal. All right? So let's turn on the next page, on page 48. So Peter Pan. So we're going to get an example of what dialect sounds like while reading Peter Pan. All right, somebody read Peter Pan's scene for us.
What's your name? He asked. Reading more Angela then, she replied. What's your name? Peter Pan. She asked, where he lives. Second to the right said Peter. And then straight on the morning. What a funny address, no? It isn't, he said. I mean, Wendy said nicely, remembering that she was postal. Is that what he put on the letters? He wished she could not mention letters. Don't get any letters, he said. But the mother gets letters. Don't have a mother, he said.
All right, so we have two different people speaking, Wendy and Peter Pan. Peter Pan, he's very what? He's very informal, absolutely. Very informal, and his dialect is different. So it's very short. But what about Wendy do we see as different? She's very formal. So whenever we see this in a story, we see how there are two separate people and they're coming from two separate places. Okay? So Peter's dialogue was very short. It was incomplete sentences, and there were a lot of contractions. Whereas Wendy seems more formal. She used full words and full sentences and longer sentences. The two registers show how different the characters are. So we see that a lot when we're reading books. We often see that in person when we talk to different people. So it just depends on your situation, where you are, and the purpose, okay? All right, turn on the next page. We got a guided reading that we're going to do together. So on your guided reading, it says, assume the paragraph was written for a personal blog. We are going to rewrite the paragraph above using any of the sentence revision strategies, where we're going to shorten a sentence, lengthen a sentence, or we're going to combine. And then we're going to give reasons why we're going to do that, okay? All right, so someone read our paragraph for about Miss Eliza.
My friend Eliza worked hard for a long time to write a play. It premiered last weekend, so I went to see it at the theater. It is a comedy, but at times I find myself feeling sad for the main character, who suffered a terrible injury from a boating accident. At the end, I heard everyone clap, then I felt extremely proud of myself.
All right, so sentence one. Is there any way that we can shorten, lengthen, or combine the sentence? How can we make that sentence sound more formal?
My friend Lisa worked hard.
What's another word for hard?
But it's not going to make sense.
It could.
Challenge.
Okay, so not challenged. If you're working hard on something that you really, really like, what are you about?
Delicate.
Okay,
Delicate, passionately.
there you go. Passionately.
Very passionate.
Yes, so my friend Eliza worked passionately.
Passionately for a long time.
Or we can take long time out. Passionately to write a play.
Yeah.
Okay?
Passionately for a long time.
We could say a long time.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's no right or wrong way to revise these sentences. I just want you all to look at how you can revise a sentence to make it sound more clear. Okay? So let me know when y'all get done rewriting number one, and then we'll go to sentence two. All Alright, so number 2 said it premiered last weekend, so I went to see it in the theater. So how can we fix that sentence where it sounds, it flows better?
So I went to watch it.
I went last weekend when it premiered.
There you go.
Oh,
Last weekend, I went to see the premiere in theaters last weekend. That would work, right? It's more structured and it's more focused. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to see it tonight.
Mm-hmm. All right, sentence 3. It's a long one. It is a comedy, but at times I found myself feeling sad for the main character who suffered a terrible injury from a boating accident. How could we shorten that sentence? We could add although. It was a comedy.
I was gonna say, isn't the comedy yet? Yeah, or.
Yeah.
I meant to say, yeah, that sounds better.
There's a comedy, or there's a comedy yet I found myself feeling sad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you want to take away the but at times?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a comedy. So we could probably say the play was a comedy, but I found myself feeling sad for the main character who had suffered an injury from a boating accident. You can probably take terrible out if you felt like it.
You said it was a comedy or the play?
The play was a comedy.
So, I found myself feeling sad.
So instead of saying who suffered a terrible injury from a boating accident, you could say who suffered an injury from a boating accident. And take terrible out. I mean, unless you want to leave that in, if you leave it in there, that's fine.
I was looking at the main character's part.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not like.
But we still want to make sure we're focused
you know
on,
who it is.
yep, so they
that's
know
what I
who
was
it is,
thinking.
absolutely. Because we're only given a short blurb of this blog.
Mhm.
And number 4 says, at the end, I heard everyone clap. Then I felt extremely proud of my friend. How could we revise that and combine those sentences or shorten it?
I'm gonna, at the end, we all applaud, and I felt extremely proud of my friend.
Okay? At the end, I heard everyone applaud. I felt it.
You can just say we all, instead of saying I heard everyone, but you can say we all applaud. Or everyone applaud.
So you want to be more specific to the audience.
Oh, just them instead of her.
Because she didn't immediately start clapping.
Right.
After she heard everyone clapping, that's when she felt extremely
Proud.
proud of her friend.
She heard
So,
everyone else.
yes.
Recognize
Mhm.
them.
Recognize that her friend did a good job. So you still want to make it specific to what she was saying.
Oh, I thought you said crowd. Did you say the crowd applaud? Well, that would sound good too.
The crowd,
Yeah.
okay? So at the end,
Where did this keep going? I don't know.
but see, that's the thing, whenever you are revising a sentence, you have to play with it. Because if you're talking about something that's going on a personal blog, you can be a little informal, but you still want to make sure your sentences flow together, okay? So there's probably 100 different ways we could revise this entire paragraph, But the main point is that we understand that we can go in and make revisions to make it sound better, okay? So you're fine saying crowd or audience,
Yeah.
or applaud or clap. They're the same thing. It just depends on how formal you want to get in your blog.
Right.
I just did I heard the crowd clap. I felt, well, I don't know if I should leave this in. Then I felt extremely
So at the end, I heard everyone clap, and I felt extremely proud of my friends.
yeah,
And that's fine, and we combine those two sentences by adding and, right? We took at the end, I heard everyone clap, and I felt extremely proud of my friends. When everybody's done rewriting, let me know so we can do our independent practice. Nana, did you need me to repeat?
Yeah, the first one, the first sentence, which one? The play, the comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and
So, the play was a comedy, but I found myself feeling sad for the main character who suffered an injury from a boating accident. So we're just taking little bits of words out of each of those sentences. For the main character. Put a comma, who. There you go. You got the fourth one? Okay. Miss Teresa, did you get that?
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty, so let's flip on the back to our independent practice. So our independent practice, we are going to rewrite these sentences in more of a formal tone, okay? So remember, we do not use contractions when we're speaking formally. We do not use slang. And we try to elevate simple words to the most formal word that we can think of, okay? So took, maybe delivered, okay? Arrived. So think about it that way. So I'm gonna give you about 10 minutes to do 2 through 7. Now I think I lied again. 2 through 9. And then we'll go over it. But remember, when you're looking at those revision sentences, 2 through 5, really make sure you're focusing on what words they're using and you elevate them to a formal word.
McCain? We're doing, finishing all of them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you know. No, you're fine.
number 2. I'm not gonna make it tomorrow. How do we change that into more formal writing?
Wait, what page?
Number 50. I mean, page 50.
Okay.
I will not,
I'm not going to be able to make one tomorrow.
so I will not be able,
Oh, I said I am not going to be able.
so it should be I will not.
Oh, I will not.
I will not be able to attend tomorrow. So make should be changed into attend.
I will not be able to make it tomorrow.
I will not be able to attend tomorrow. All right, number 2, Annie got an expensive new purse.
Amy has a new luxury.
What's another word for bought? Purchase. So Annie purchased a new expensive purse. That makes it more formal. So number 4, what do you want for lunch today?
What would you like
Yes, to what?
for lunch today?
Okay, so either what would you like for lunch today or what would you like to eat for lunch today? Either one of those would have been fine. All right, so number 5, George scheduled an appointment. Oh, I gave y'all the answer. George made the appointment for next month. Oh, so it should say George scheduled an appointment for next month. That's the most formal for that sentence. Yeah, I definitely gave y'all the answer. So instead of made, we made scheduled. All right, number 6. Which sentence would you most likely be used when speaking to a close friend? B. I'd love to come. Because remember, we're using contractions in that sentence. Number 7. All right, we got to pick 2 sentences. A and what else? Say it again, Ms. Teresa. Yes, A and C.
I didn't know.
I didn't know what's wrong, just big C.
Yep, says choose 2 sentences that best combine the sentences above. So yes, we choose 2. All right, and number 8, it asks us which sentence should be shortened to be more impactful. Not C. D, sentence 4. And number 9, which sentence shows an example of dialect? D, you betcha.
What was 1? What was number 1?
Number 1.
I mean number 2. Sorry.
Number 2, I will not be able to attend tomorrow. All right, number 10. Which option shows the best way to lengthen a sentence to make it appropriate for a formal workplace? Not, you said what?
B?
No, not B. D. D, yes. Rick will be out of the office from July 1st through July 5th. All right, number 11. Which option below best combines the sentence above for clarity? B. And number 12, which option shows the best way to shorten the sentence to make it more powerful? C. Mhm. Number 13 says, identify the two sentences below that would be appropriate when writing to a teacher.
B and D.
B and D, absolutely. Number 14, which word or phrase from the passage is an example of dialect? C. Would I? There it is. Number 15, what type of language register is used in the passage? Remember, our register is either formal or informal. Formal. So A. And identify the three types of languages that might be used in an informal register. A, D, and E. A, D, and E, yes. All right, so pretty straightforward how we use a variety of different sentence styles, but we also, again, need to make sure we watch out for.
What was 12?
So whenever we're writing or talking, we still need to make sure that we're being cognizant of our dialect. We want to make sure that we are not saying things that could possibly offend someone based on where they're from or anything like that, okay?
Yeah, like working on for lunch. That's very common. Yeah.
That's very common, yes.
I'm like guilty of that.
Or what do you want to eat today? Like, what do you want? So, yes. So just learning how to say it in a more formal way. Because sometimes people think the way we say it very informally is rude.
Yeah.
When it's just like, like, for instance, when someone calls your name, what do you say? Some people say what?
What?
See, some people say what, and then people are like, wait a minute, why are you saying it like that? I'm like, I just said.
Because I tell the kids all the time.
That me too. My mom she hates
I hate
that
that
what.
too.
She was like, if you want me one more time, it is yes.
Even the kids at home, when they call each other, like, one person go like, what? I was like, you don't say that.
You say yes. So yes, again, that goes back to dialect. Some people might be okay with you saying what. Others are going to be like, don't talk to me like that.
Oh, yeah.
They automatically think you have an attitude because you said what. And it's just like, what? Wait a minute, I'm so confused. What I say?
I'm so like, feel bad.
But again, it goes back to formal and informal language. Just like in the South, I think it's all over now, how kids call each other bruh. I hate that word with a passion.
They say
Bro?
start saying bro, and it's like almost sometimes instinct. Like sometimes when I'm talking with my mom, she'll look at me, and I was like, I mean it.
I hate it because I'm like, do I look like a man? Do I look like I'm your brother? No, I'm not saying, okay, please don't say it. Or when my elementary 5th grade used to be like, man. I said, do I look like a man? You know what I mean, Miss Green. No, I don't know, because you keep calling me man. So I'm trying to figure out where's the man, because I could have sworn I was born a woman, so I'm confused. So certain dialects is okay certain places.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, my best friend's grandmother, she's born and raised in Philly.
Oh, wow.
She's rough. I didn't know that when I was 19, and we were best friends in college. So I went home with her for the weekend. Didn't think it was a big deal. We're getting ready to go out to the club, and we walk in the living room. We're like, okay, we're about to go. Mind you, her whole family is very different from mine. Her grandmother had to be well in her 60s then. I would say late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, where are you natural born sluts going?
See, no.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my gosh, your grandma just called me a slut. Oh my God, what are we doing? Maybe we shouldn't go. And she was like, that's just the way she talks to everybody. That's the up north thing in her. That's that hard street stuff with her.
I didn't like that. See,
Like,
I had friends.
Sweet as pie, like she's sweet as pie, but she is gonna cuss like a sailor.
Like
Oh,
my friend's family does that, and I used to stay with them, and that's how they talk to each other.
Yeah.
But I used to be like, don't do that to me. Like my mom and dad don't talk to me like that. And I know we all from the same place, but don't. But yeah, not everybody, but some people are really like that.
Yes, and that's the way my best friend's entire.
Wow.
Okay.
The entire family. So when I was there with her one day, she was cussing at her mom, and I was like,
That's North Philly. How is she from North Philly?
yeah, I was like, what are you doing? Why would you talk to your mom like that? She was like, girl, whatever, she'll be okay. I was like, my mom was from the South, babe. I would have gotten backhanded. Okay, And like even like her, like I would go there for barbecues. I would be like I would pour like a drink in a cup and I'll put a lid on it. And everybody's like, why do you keep here? You go. I don't drink in front of older people. I can't. And whenever her grandmother come around, put the cup down and like scoot it away from me.
You don't feel comfortable drinking in front of older people?
No, I don't. Nope, because my grandmother was like that. She was like, do not drink a beer in my face. You better pour it in
My
a cup.
mom is like.
At least have a little bit more respect for me and put it in a cup.
We
In
were
a
at
cup.
a wedding, and
Yep.
my mom didn't know I drink.
And she does not like alcohol at all.
No, I've been grown for a long time, and my grandma still look at me like I'm half crazy. If I get a wine glass out at my own house that I pay for, and I'm like, pour it up. She's like, Kia, can you put that in another cup, please? I'm like, it's a wine glass. Okay, don't worry about it.
So you don't want to see it.
Nope, so I always have to
Drink
wait
water.
till my grandma's gone. And I was like, I gotta wait till grandma goes. Tell grandma to go outside. I told my uncle, like, call grandma. He was like, what you do? Call grandma outside. So yeah, like we won't drink in front of my grandma. Her sons will, but it's different for ladies. She doesn't like that. Yeah, she's because I remember my grandfather was living. I think I was like in middle school. No, I was in elementary school. And I was like, ooh, I can't wait till I get older so I can drink alcohol and get woozy. And my grandparents like, there is nothing worse than a drunk woman. Don't you ever get woozy or whatever you just called it. My granddaddy, if he was still living to this day, he would tell you, because I was like, I can't wait to get woozy. And I did my head like that and everything. And he was just like, where'd you come from? But now I'm like, oh God, if my kids would ever say that, I think I'm crawling in a rock. But yes, in the north and the south, I learned the dialect is very different. Went to New Jersey and was at the beach, and I heard like this cat call.
New Jersey.
I was like, what is that? Like this guy was like, yo.
No, they say you're.
I'm like, what? I'm on the beach with my family, and I'm with my in-laws at that time. So I'm like, oh my God, what's going on?
They do that in New York too. They
Yeah.
do that here, and then like cat
And
calls
it's
you.
so loud though. Like it's not subtle. It's loud, and it's just it's like it's
obnoxious.
yeah. They are.
They your young boy.
Yes, I was like, and I'm up here looking around like, what's going on?
My
After you
dad
don't
used to
even hear them.
cuss it. Like my dad is everybody knew my dad's the crazy man on the block. So anytime he's like, yo, old head, he's like, what? What you got? And he just be pissed. Everybody in check. It's so crazy.
Yes.
Everybody's different.
But in the South is A Charlie, A. Oh my gosh,
That's
you A
ugly.
or speak one more time. Don't do that. I just look at him like, no. Because I mean, I'm born and raised here in Georgia. I've heard it all of my life. So I've just been like, when I went to New Jersey, I heard that and it was so loud. I was like, my God. I think I'm okay with A, shawty. Hey, hey. I think I'm okay. It was so loud though. Like that's what made me mad. I was like, you just loud and wrong. What are you doing?
It's almost embarrassing when they do that to you because everyone's looking at you and you just gotta act like
Minding my business. And then I also didn't know in Jersey, in certain areas, they have certain things locked up and you actually have to go to the front now and come open up cabinets.
like certain medicine, there's like actual like stuff, not just like medicine or anything.
No, it's
but
like soap.
Material, yes.
Lotion.
Why?
It just gets stolen
It
so
gets,
much.
they steal so much. So I didn't know that. I went to Atlantic City for a family reunion, and I was like, hey, I need to run to the store. I don't have my left my soap, everything. So I went down to like the little bodega. Everything was locked up, and I was like, oh wait.
And the glass, and the glass.
Yeah, I said, what is going on? And he was like, oh yeah, people still around. I said they do in Atlanta too, but dang, over some soap, some Dove. I was like, and the thing, it was hilarious because I just could not I've never seen that before in my life. Okay, drugs, yes, I've seen that, but I've never seen soap locked up in my life. So I couldn't figure out why soap. I remember I went back to the hotel and I told my uncle, he's from Boston. I was like, can you explain to me why the soap, Dove,
You know
was
how
locked
many
up?
people go into hair salons and sell Dove, like soap in Philly? They would take them, they
Are
would go
you
into the hair
serious?
salons, they would go into all the barbershops,
Yeah.
and they would sell the crap, and they make their money. If people buy it.
Yes, I heard that too.
They resell it.
Wow.
They steal stuff and then
They
resell it.
sell it.
To make the money.
I mean, I've heard about boosting and stuff, but soap?
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, they do it down here too.
I
Real
mean,
crazy.
they do, but at least boost me a good bag or something. Get a good Chanel truck. Not one of those. I'm waiting for one of them to pull up. Okay, I got you. Let me come in here with your bags. Yeah, let me see your bags today. What bags you got? Yeah, I need you to hit the Chanel truck whenever you see one. And let me know. But soap, baby, I can pay $9 for my little box of soap. It's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry about the soap, baby. But yes, it is very different. The dialect from north and the south is completely different.
You can't say certain stuff.
Yes, so down here, if you call a black male boy, that offends them.
Because it's like slavery.
Yes. So you say, hey boy, come here. They automatically get mad. Where in other places like New York, son is a word of endearment. But even down here, if you call a man from the South son, they don't like that either.
My,
So it just depends on who, you have to know who you're talking to basically.
Even if you say alright, that could be alright or that's what I thought.
Exactly. So whenever you hear me,
Alright.
so I saw it on Instagram, they were like, you know a girl is mad when she's like, oh wow. Oh, okay.
yeah.
You got it.
I've been saying you got it so much. I'm just like, you got it. I'm good.
Slang is just so, it can be so great. It can make conversations so spicy.
But it can make
But it
areas
can-
real gray when you say it, you like, no, wait a minute. She,
It can be
now,
just,
hold up, what you mean you gonna be right back with that? Hold up.
but if you know how to switch it up.
And it's the way you say it too.
Yes. Don't worry, I'm gonna be right back. Whoa. You better go outside right now and get something. But going wrong, baby. He said, what? No, I ain't got time. You got a home where? Oh, child. Baby, I ain't about that life. I gotta go. I remember my mom always kept telling me, she's like, I don't like you dating guys from the south side of town. Because I lived in Gwinnett.
Oh.
Where's that?
Gwinnett's like, it's north. Where the Migos are from.
Oh, yeah, we're talking about, and then so, is that not a good thing? Because I hear that it's not a bad area. But
Oh,
then-
it's a very nice area.
It's a nice area, but, yeah.
But,
I'm
so,
confused by
I
all
didn't
the
want to date guys in Gwinnett. I want to date the guys in Swat, Southwest Atlanta.
Oh, you live in the
Yeah, so I
Not
decided to
Southwest.
bring this guy home with me to meet my mother.
Was he country?
He was just ghetto. And there was nothing, I can't even dress it up. He was like, hey, what's up, mama?
Oh!
Mama was like,
Yeah.
so if you know my mom, the look on her face, I just was like crawling into my skin, like, oh my God.
I know what you're talking about.
And like, I tried to tell him, like, hey, can you like maybe not wear that? Can you just like,
Yeah.
we're going to dinner with my mom and my brothers. Like, they're like, I need you to like Hey,
Yeah.
don't wear those.
When there, you can't take it out though.
And then he had gold in his mouth.
Oh.
I was like, oh my God, I'm just gonna scream. My brother was like, here, tell him to go like that again. I was like, my brother's like, where'd you find him, kid? I was like, I don't know. I swear he didn't have gold in his mouth yesterday.
Oh,
When he arrived today, like he was like, yeah, he kept doing that the entire time. I was like crying at the dinner table. Like I was like, Mom, I don't know where he came from.
What did your mom say after the
My mom was like, don't you ever bring a man over here that cannot show me the teeth God gave him. Okay? Because that fool. Don't let him back in my house again. I was like, but Mom, he's a really good person. Oh, okay. Anybody got to sit there at the doggone table smiling like that, showing me his teeth? I don't want to. Like, my mom is so put together. That bothered her
so badly.
Like, it bothered her soul. Like, you don't understand the call I got from my grandmother after this. And this is like a Southern Baptist woman.
Oh my God.
Talk about you dirty.
I
In the
heard,
most holy way.
yes, I heard that Jesus was going to be so disappointed in my life.
Oh, no.
I was like, oh.
Oh, Lord.
So mind you, I can count how many people from that day forward met my family because the way my grandmother talked to me, I was like, baby, you gotta worry about it. I'm not gonna date nobody. She was like, Lord, what would Jesus do, kid? You think you would entertain somebody that looked like that? I was like, Grandma, I don't know what Jesus would do. But I know Jesus is holding me right now because I know you're coming. Like, I know you're coming for my soul at this point. Like, the way she was talking was like, oh my God. So, yeah. It's completely different. Like, if my best friend's family would have been my family, he would have been fine. But my family was like, whoa. Hey, son, where are you in the wrong place? Move out the way.
Yeah.
That's my brother's like, oh my God, yeah, who is this guy? Bad decisions, I know. Can we get through this dinner so I don't have to talk to him no more? Because after y'all embarrass me, I don't want him to call me at all. Because, like, my family does not sugarcoat much of anything. So I'm like, you can go ahead and get you a plate and go back and just. Because that's what he kept talking about, too. Ooh, yeah, I'm going to have to take me a plate back to the crib. I was like, oh, my God. My mom was like, oh, no, he ain't taking my $40 steak nowhere. I was like, oh, God. Just please, Jesus. Let a fire break out or something. I need an escape plan.
I just tell my boyfriend when he met my grandparents, it's very much yes ma'am, no ma'am, no thank you.
What did he say?
Yes please. Huh?
What did he say?
It would just be like none of that, absolutely at all. He'd be like, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I'd be like, no.
Yep,
no.
my grandparents always hated yes and yep. Yep.
Yes.
So I always used to say yep as a kid when I was mad.
Mhm.
So other than that, it was yes ma'am, no ma'am to my grandparents. My mom was like, yes or no, it's fine. But when I got mad, I was like, yep. My brother's like, oh, she mad. Like, even to this day, if my brother texts me and something has happened, I'll be like, yep. He'll be like, man, chill out, please, kid. Just don't send no crazy text later on. Like, you need to cool down. It's like, all right, yep. And that's always been, like, my key word. Like, yep to me is, you got about 5 seconds. Your daughter says the same thing?
But I can tell, like, all those 3 words I can tell, especially at work. People do that, you ask them to do something, alright, yep. I'm like, fix it. Like, it's not that serious.
Or if I don't say anything, I just put my hand up. It's like, all right, you done told me twice. Don't come back over here and tell me to do something again. I heard, oh, okay. Like, all right, I heard you. Don't come back over here no more, lady. You got your feelings hurt today. Or like if I raise my eyes, I'm like, look, I heard you twice. Don't say it again. Don't say it again. Because the next time you say it, it's going to be like, do you not think I can hear something? Like, I heard you 5 times earlier. So, yeah. But see, again, that would have been fine to somebody that was okay with that. But some people would lose it if you say that to them. I'm very, okay, I'll get it done. But you're not going to hound me and like be over my back and make sure I'm about to do it, because I will purposely not do it. Alright, y'all, I'm about to clock out. See y'all later. I used to do that fast food restaurants. Key, you gonna take the trash out? Go take it out.
Oh my gosh, I remember I was
I'm not
on
about to
my-
take this trash out, slinging it on that doggone thing, juice is flying. I'm not doing this.
I used
I
to
was like,
work.
okay. They were like, Kia, we don't need you to work for us anymore. Ooh, great, I'm so glad y'all fired me. Because my aunt was the general manager, and I was like, dang, I can't just quit. So,
She was your general manager? Oh.
of the store. So the manager was like, Kia, I mean, you don't cook fast enough, you move slow. You're always talking about how hot it is, how it stinks in here.
I mean, honesty.
And he was like, whenever we ask you to take the trash out, you say you're gonna do it, then we find it by the back door. And baby, I be having it piled up. Because the first time I was on trash duty, I threw it and juice flew on me.
Oh, yeah, you gotta be careful about
And I
that.
was like, no, you don't understand. I threw up all over the parking lot. I could not, like, I was taking clothes off. I was like, the smell, the thought of what it was or what it could be, God,
I worked at Arby's, never again, and I was like my first trash run, and
oh,
yeah, it was my first one, and so mind you, it's like these big bags, and of course they have like the meat, it comes in this bag, and they cut it, and then they cook it.
They
And
cut
it's
it?
like, honestly, I could show y'all about with a picture of the meat that they cook look like. Ugh, it's not
The
even
thing is,
real
they
meat.
don't wash their meat in restaurants. They take it straight out the bag.
Oh no, you cook it cooks in the plastic
Oh,
bag, and then they cut it
no.
open and then put it on the meat cutter, but they have the bag with all the juice, and it stinks. It's not,
Yeah.
it doesn't smell like meat, it smells like poop and like cat food, like mixed
What
together.
kind of meat was it?
Yeah, it was like the roast beef that they
That's
had.
why I don't eat that roast beef, but I always look funny.
No, the only things that you can eat at Arby's are
The
like
fries.
the chicken, the fries, anything that's fried, you can eat it because it's cooked. But other than that, it's like the chicken and the turkey, that's the only meat that I would eat there.
I'm not gonna eat nothing.
Ooh.
I lasted at Wendy's a whole week and a half.
But the juice from the
I
bag,
was so proud of
it
myself.
like,
What? I lasted at Wendy's for a week and a half. I was proud of myself.
I don't think they have guys too.
Because at the first day, I wanted to leave. When the grease popped me when I dropped the fries, I was over it. It was hot. I used to go home smelling like fried food. I hate that smell.
my hair would smell like, and my hair's curly, so I don't wash it every day.
Yeah,
So I had to
couldn't
keep
take it.
washing it, and it made my hair so dry.
I couldn't take it. I was like, it stinks in here. It smells like a mixture of like, ugh, I can't. My aunt was always like, why are you staying outside? Because it stinks in there. Ugh, it's so horrible. I can't do it. She was like, I cannot stand you, little girl. I'm like, ugh, I can't. I don't know why y'all, I just want to be, I just need to get married to a rich man. This is stupid.
So like my sister.
Like I was every bit of like 17, like I can't do this. I needed 2 jobs at the time. I was like, look, I'm just gonna have to work overtime at the Y, because I was a lifeguard. I was like, I'll just do swim lessons at 6 in the morning. Like I'll just get up, because smelling like this, I can't do it. She was like, who am I talking to? Somebody who ain't, don't do this. I have 2 parents, mom, dad. We need to have a conversation. Wendy's is not it. But I was so happy when that man came there and fired me. I was like, woo, thank you, Jesus. All right, Dee needs your uniform back today, tomorrow. I just my aunt was like, can you act like you're sad? No, did you need my shirt now? Or can I wash it and bring it back to you? What you want me to do? Because, baby, that's all I need to hear is I ain't got to come back. Night shift, child. I couldn't figure out this doggone button on my ear to save my life. Really? Had it on, was just talking. Like, I don't know what this lady just ordered. It's dumb. I was like, she heard you. Ah! Welcome to Wendy's. How may I help you? Just loud and wrong and could care less. Like, okay, whatever.
Oh, we're gonna do this for homework.
I guess I can read it to y'all. I'll read it to y'all. But, so supply and demand. So what have you bought recently that was so low that you bought 2? Was it a want or a need? And what did you refuse to buy because it was too expensive, and was it a want or a need?
So what did we bought so low that?
that you bought too?
That you bought? Maybe deodorant.
Deodorant. So low you bought two. It's cheaper to buy two than just buy the one, right? My Walmart one.
So,
So,
body wash.
body wash, yep. Mine was strawberries recently.
Yeah, my fridge, everybody that's going grocery shopping is full of strawberries right now.
Yes, so I went to,
It must be a sale.
yes, so even at Kroger, so a couple weeks ago I went, they didn't even have any, and they did, and they were like $5 for like the little pack. I was like, I paid $5 for this, normally 2 for $5. But then out of nowhere, I'm like, where's all these strawberries coming from? Yeah, so strawberries, I bought like 4, because I was like, I might as well just buy 4 packs.
Yeah, I feel like I wanted strawberries.
Huh?
I think it's the season.
It's coming up, or it's already here?
Cause they taste good right now.
They do, and in the
Yeah.
summer, they don't
They're
taste so good.
seasonal.
I don't know what it is in the summer, they're not that good.
Is it the season?
It's
Because
the
I asked
season.
my mom, and she said it wasn't in season, so I asked
Yeah.
to get some. And then we went to Walmart, I went to Walmart like yesterday,
Yes,
and there was so many, like.
but
the
they
big
have
ones.
them, and they're like fresh and juicy, and they're
They
sweet.
taste
So
so
good,
good.
not
Wow.
like
I
sour.
put them in everything.
But some of them, like, I don't know what it is, like, when it gets like to mid-spring, mid-summer,
Yeah.
they start tasting like water.
No
Yeah.
flavor.
No flavor at all.
I think it's seasonal.
Yeah.
Although Publix, I don't know what they put in their fruit, because their fruit is always amazing.
Yeah.
I think they put
It don't go
sugar
bad.
water in it.
Why is it?
They just got better
Because
quality.
it's amazing. Like the pineapple,
Like, even
the
the
taste of
fruit.
pineapple is so sweet.
Yeah.
Not even like, I'm not a melon person. Like I love watermelon. But honeydew melon, like their cantaloupe, is sweet.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Like
like
it is so
cantaloupe.
hard to find like a good
Yeah.
one. So yeah, I have bought 2 of those.
Mhm.
Something that you refuse to buy because it's too high. Everything.
So many things.
So I hate buying gas right now.
Oh, yeah.
I know that sounds so terrible, but I hate buying gas. I hate buying gas. Gas company, I get $65 to fill up my truck.
Are you, what kind of person
I
are you?
have a Honda Pilot. I fill it up every week, and if I'm really driving, I have practice meetings. I have to fill like twice a week.
Oh,
That's a lot.
It's a lot of gas.
that's a lot of money you're spending in a week
Yeah.
on just gas alone.
Yes, and I still have 3 little people and
Oh.
2 dogs. So it's like, my lord, let me budget this little gas money out. So yeah, so something that I refused to buy for a while, and I did break down and buy it, a perfume.
What kind?
Bottle Red Rouge.
Oh.
It was $435.
Oh my gosh.
Who's that one?
The
I would
highest
not-
I'll go is
I
like
would not
50.
buy it.
It's crazy. Person I wouldn't buy either. But they just told me like good.
Yes, but I found it for $200.
Oh, just buy it.
I did. As soon as I saw that, I was like, whoop. What's the name in my box? Bottle Red Rouge.
Oh.
I had to discontinue Miss Dior. I had 2 big bottles because my job they give us free products every month. So I posted them just to like give reviews on my products, and they was like, "How much can I get them for?"
Yeah.
I sold those for a good amount.
Yes, but no, that's the thing, like, some people are gonna pay what they want for what they want.
That's right.
So supply and demand, we talk about that all the time. So depending on what somebody wants, depends on if there's a demand for it, a market for it, and can they supply it. So COVID hit. Before COVID hit, you could find every soap in every flavor you wanted, every scent, every sparkle, every shade. As soon as COVID hit, what happened?
Everything just went down.
There was no soap in any stores.
It should have been like
Exactly. There was no hand sanitizer, no paper towel, no
this.
toilet paper.
No,
Clorox
so hard
wipes.
to find.
Huh?
Toilet paper and cleaning
Yes. But now, remember, we went through COVID. You couldn't find it anywhere. You had to look for their mom who was up at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Walmart run to be like, hey, Lysol's at this store. And that's how you knew it was out there. But now what's happening in the store? They have too much what? They have too much of everything. So soap, bleach, cleaner. Although I don't know what is going on with bacon recently.
It's bacon and chicken.
Bacon, chicken, and Tide wash soap.
The prices increased, right?
No, it's
Chicken-
not on the shelf.
Chicken,
Like-
they said that there's like lower, I guess there's just less chicken, I guess.
Yes,
That makes
so
sense.
there's not.
Chicken shortage.
There is a
Yeah.
chicken shortage, yes.
That's
So whenever you go to certain restaurants, it'll tell you there is a shortage on chicken,
And
so the
some
prices
prices
have
are
gone
higher.
up. Even remember sauces were missing at one point. Remember you couldn't get sauce at Chick-fil-A?
There's a sauce shortage.
Yeah.
There was a lot of.
Coin
there's actually-
shortage, everything.
Yes,
Still a
coin
coin
shortage.
shortage.
Still a coin shortage. But again, this goes back to supply and demand. So when you order something off of Amazon, how long is it taking it to get there if you don't have Prime? Depending on where it's coming from.
Don't have it
If
like.
you don't have Prime,
Sometimes like a
Week.
A week.
sometimes a week, sometimes weeks.
Yeah.
And why do we think that's happening? Worker shortage. You only have so many people that have their license to drive a semi, that have the trailers on the back with all our stuff in it. Guess what? If you ever go down to Savannah, you can even Google it. If you look at the port where all the containers come in, they are stacked. It seems like a mile freaking high. They still have stuff on ships at the port with containers on them. If you order furniture, you're waiting at least 3 to 6 months for furniture. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask my mom to get me like.
Oh, child, I can't, because every time, I try so hard with IKEA, but I just cannot put it together. I put it together, but then when it's time to like move it,
When you move it, you don't
once
have to move
you
it.
can move it across the room, it
You
ain't never
can't.
gonna sit right again.
Once you move it, that's it.
The,
That's why it's so
the
reasonable.
bookshelf starts to go like this, a little bit more every time.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't know why I can't.
Mm-mm.
And then I'm always like, oh, that's what those screws must have been for. Whenever it hits that little lead, I'm like, oh man, that's what those screws are.
Yeah, I asked my mom to just order one of the IKEA like little side tables
Yes.
online, and she was like, "No, I will just drive to Atlanta to go get one."
Yes, because and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like I have
Like
actually,
a $10
yes,
table.
I'd rather drive to go get my products if I can, rather than not. So you know, Amazon is having a brick and mortar, like it has a brick and mortar now in California. So they're opening up an Amazon store that you can actually go in to get what you actually purchase. It'll tell you what store it's at, and it'll let you actually go and pick up your own merchandise. But they're doing the pilot in California. Can you imagine how many are about to open up?
A lot.
Because you gotta think about all the other Amazon warehouses we have around here. Why can't I just go to the store and pick it up?
I think
I already ordered it. I don't need to wait 7 days.
I know, right? I'm
We're
pretty sure
pulling up
they're
now.
opening an IKEA down here.
Where?
Like over here, not.
I hope so. I'm tired of going to Atlantic Station.
Are they putting one out here?
I swear they are. Me and my mom.
You can go ahead and sign out, guys. If they do, I hope